It looks like I'm gonna need it.
You need a specific calculator.
Where did you buy it?
Amazon. You can buy it at the bookstore.
What's your last name?
Ui.
So I was right. Stacy, see you.
It's like if this guy goes. Buy it. Buy it or did you rent? I rented. You said you bought it. I did not. I said
Wait, they had that calculator at the bookstore?
Yeah, but it's like 50 bucks.
no, it's more like 60.
And how much was it on Amazon?
25.
I guess I'll order it right now.
10.
Yes, that's me.
You call Steve.
Yes.
You don't run
W
the
salad. Yeah, W salad.
Oh.
Anybody would get that.
So Waneski.
Oh, I don't have a P.O. box yet.
You can send it to West Mall. Pick it up for a weekend.
Dude, like, if you just, like, there's a different address to use. You don't have a P.O. box yet.
I think I'm just gonna order it to West Palm and have my dad bring it. What's
It's
the
really easy
calculator
to,
called?
what, you could just send it to mine.
They would be the box?
They have that.
Wait, one more minute.
Well, like, you could have different shipping.
What's the calculator called?
So,
I didn't know we needed it.
Mine are missing.
Yeah, $25.90. $25.90. Is the 10BII plus?
Yeah.
So, contact before we start. Explaining the shark house thing. Boss there, can you imagine Thomas being in what's your last name?
I guess I gotta send it to my house.
You're so Asian.
That's awesome.
Alright. Thank you, your order has been placed.
my dad from Southern.
So what are you picking up?
I'm picking up shit. I'm gonna have my dad send it by mail.
Yeah.
Oh, let's do one more person then. Okay, we'll let them get in. All right.
All right. So what's your last name? I appreciate it. You're not on the list, are you? What's your last name?
Ali A-L-I.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a real estate principles class. I'm Dr. Fred Forgy. This is Dr. Thomas Wertzer. We're going to be co-teaching this class. Obviously, you got the, I'm assuming you got the emails describing that, yes? Okay, good. So I'm going to be doing the first half of the course, basically the first 4 weeks. He's going to do the last 4 weeks. Okay, I tend to be kind of the numbers guy, so you get to start out with the hard stuff and then get to go to the easy stuff. So he's going to be dealing with a lot of the sort of land use issues. I'm going to be dealing with a lot of the finance issues. Okay, so thus the need for the calculator and kind of using Excel and that sort of thing. Should be a really fun course. One of the things that we're going to be doing is starting off tonight, understanding how does real estate get its value. Also understanding, what it takes to effectively value a home. Also any other sort of commercial real estate property. Talking a little bit about affordability and what it takes for an individual to qualify for a mortgage. Talk a little bit about how to calculate mortgages, that sort of thing. So that's where we're going to kind of get started tonight. But before we do that, we kind of give us a chance to sort of talk a little bit about, I guess, other aspects of the course. And I'm going to let Thomas go ahead, and since he's going to be leaving here in a few minutes, go ahead and talk a little bit about what you're going to be doing in your part of the course.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone, welcome to the class. This is going to be a fun class. As in, we work hard, we have a lot of fun, and we get actually entertained, inspired, and educated. Yeah. As he said, he is the quantitative numbers guy, as you already see on the handouts, a bunch of numbers and a bunch of tables. I am coming from actually the land use planning and geography world of real estate. I am dealing with the legal issues on property, personal or private property versus governmental institutional issues, and all the fun stuff you can have, aka lawsuits and troublemaking. He gives you the idea of, okay, how do we raise value, how do we count value, discount value, and I'm actually showing then what by property type and land development types we are going to deal with the kind of framework of the what I call the built environment. Yeah? So I don't care if that building is $50 million worth or just $5 million or if it's pure land. We are talking about what are the regulations you have to be aware of that come into place if you want to develop that.
Okay.
And that pretty much sums up the 4 weeks we're going to have.
And the way that we've split it, just so it's clear, so there's not going to be like an overlap, I guess. So whatever I cover in the first 4 weeks will be what will be tested on the midterm, all right? And that's all you're going to be responsible for is obviously for my portion of the course. Whenever he takes over after the midterm, everything from that point forward will be covered on the final exam. Nothing from the first part will be covered on the final, okay? Pretty straightforward in terms of kind of division of responsibilities.
So you're not crunching numbers with me. Yeah, that's his job. But in my case, you have to understand a little bit, let's say, where the power of zoning and land use regulations are coming from. So we're doing a little bit of law background. Most of it is covered in the textbook. I usually follow the structure of the of the textbook with some insertions in terms of my lectures. So I do encourage you guys to take notes in my lectures. Because there might be some inserts that are not yet in that textbook, but they're important because the textbook didn't cover it the right way. Put a different emphasis on it. Yeah? Contacts, do we have the contacts up in the syllabus?
Yeah,
Just yours.
well, yeah. And
Yeah, and I just provide mine via email once the midterm comes closer.
okay. Anything else you want to say or talk about before I jump in?
I just have fun teaching this class, so I hope you guys enjoy this.
So I'm sure they're going to look forward to your return.
I am different in the classroom, for those who know me from the Shark Cage program. I am different in the classroom than being a Shark Cage judge, okay? I teach my classes with the assumption that you have done your preparation, aka the readings. Because I can lecture the topic without opening the book. Yeah? And I want you to listen, I want you to take notes, I want you to ask questions, rather than just, it's 8 p.m. and I'm falling asleep. Yeah? So, highly dynamic, highly entertaining. We have different teaching styles, depending on how dynamic you guys are. We might do a top of the hour short break. He usually doesn't do that. Yeah? So we'll see. I'm really highly interactive because some of the legal stuff is really nerve-wracking boring. But it's exciting once you're actually through that. Yeah? On that note, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. We will see you in 4 weeks.
Have fun.
Okay, so first of all, everybody get the book. Anybody not have the book? Okay, so a couple of you don't have the book. Okay, the more important thing is, how many of you don't have the calculator? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I brought, looks like just enough, maybe, extras. Okay? That is it.
That is it?
Okay, go over here. Okay, over here. Okay, you can share? Okay.
Is there an app?
There is an app. You can use it on your phone, and it's an HP 10B2 app. But you will need the regular calculator for the exam to make sure that no one's cheating and that thing. So, okay. So, what we're going to do is we're going to sort of start off and talk a little bit about what gives real estate value. Okay, and this is one of those sorts of things. I mean, usually when I ask that question initially, everybody is like, you know, this whole standard stock answer of it's all about location, location, location kind of thing. But the reality is, at least for commercial real estate, in most instances, it's about the cash flow that the property can generate. Okay, and so like let's assume that you want to buy a small rental property, like a duplex or a fourplex or a little apartment, community. And you want to know, how much should I pay for that? How much is it worth? Okay, what sort of a return do I want to get on that? How do you go about doing that? How do you go about setting a value for something like that? What you're really going to be doing is looking at what is the income that property throws off each and every month, each and every year, and then ultimately coming up with some sort of a way to kind of transform that income into kind of a rate of return that will tell you, well, how much it's really worth. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay? So what we're going to do, just to kind of give you a perspective of kind of how this works, is we're going to take a really simple little apartment community and kind of work through the details. So the first thing that we need to know is, how much is the rent going to be per month? Give me a dollar amount.
$3,200.
Oh, shit.
That's a really expensive one-bedroom apartment.
Oh, you said you must have done
$1,000
that.
bucks.
Okay, $1,000 a month. All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to say $1,000 a month. All right, times 12 months in the year is going to be $12,000 a year in income. Okay? Everybody cool with that? All right? And so that's going to be what we're going to call potential gross income. All right? Or shortened PGI. All right? So $12,000. And so we're just going to look at this one unit, okay? This one sort of apartment unit, think of it like a condo even, all right? So it's generating $1,000 a month. Now, from that, that's the maximum revenue the property would generate if it's 100% occupied, no issues with late fees or that sort of thing. So this is the most amount of money that the property can generate on an annual basis. Everybody comfortable with that? Thus the term potential gross income, all right? From that, we're going to subtract out vacancies and collection losses, all right? Now, vacancies and collection loss, what would you say the difference between a vacancy and a collection loss is? A vacancy is where it's simply not occupied, therefore you're not getting rent from it. A collection loss is you may have a tenant, but they're not paying the rent. Okay, does that make sense, the difference? All right, so in this case, let's say that maybe the tenant doesn't pay the rent, 1 month out of the year, for whatever reason, or maybe you gave them a rebate, but let's just say that on average, $1,000 is going to be the vacancy and collection loss over the course of the year, all right? Also, what else might cause you to not be able to collect rent? Anything else that you can think of? What about whenever a new tenant takes over? What has to happen?
Real estate fees.
Okay, real estate fees, but in terms of the collection of the money. In other words, if you move out today, is somebody else necessarily able to move in immediately tomorrow? What has to happen? They usually have to come in, clean it up a little bit, put it on the market, and potentially, get it released. So there may be a period of losses there as well, okay, that you've got to potentially think about and factor in. But for the most part, we're just going to stick with this, all right? Now this one may not necessarily apply, but it could. We'll talk about this. Other income that the property could generate. Now, with a large apartment community, you might have all sorts of things that would generate revenue, other non-real estate revenue. Can you think of any? In other words, what might be some other things that you might pay for as a tenant?
Utilities.
Okay, utilities, but we're looking maybe for revenue that the apartment community as a whole might generate. No, that's going to be expenses.
HOA.
No, that's good. I mean, that would potentially be another source of revenue, but in this case, it's not specifically what I'm looking for. Anybody else? Well, sorry? That's going to be an expense.
Furniture, maybe rental.
Well, okay, maybe furniture rental. What I was thinking, parking. okay, would be probably the most prevalent one. That, you know, you have to pay for your parking space, and you have to pay for covered parking, something like that. All right, and so that might be, let's say, an extra 50 bucks a month. 50 bucks a month times 12 would be what, 600 bucks a year, yes? All right, so that's going to be a positive 600, okay? Then, at that point, we're simply going to do the simple math of taking the 12,000 minus the 1,000, which would be now 11,000, and then add in the 600, so we're going to end up with 11,600. All right? And that is going to be called our effective gross income, or EGI. Okay? Now, the way to think about this EGI, effective gross income, that's the real money. That's the hard cash currency that we're actually bringing in on an annual basis for this particular property. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay? That's the term effective. It's different from gross, because gross would be the maximum we could bring in, at least in terms of the rental revenue. Okay, we do have this other income, but this is just really telling us what is the real cash money we're going to put effectively into our bank account. All right? Now, from that, we subtract out total operating expenses. Now, this is where all those things that you were naming off a few minutes ago would sort of fall into the operating expense category. You know, things like property management, things like utilities, property taxes, insurance, all of those sorts of things are going to be operating expenses for the property that the owner of the property would be responsible for paying. Does that make sense? Okay? All right, so that, we might just simply say, it might be a fixed percent or just a dollar amount that we're going to add up all of those. And so let's just say we're going to make that maybe $3,600, okay, that we're going to subtract out. And that is going to give us the number that's going to be where the magic begins to happen. The net operating income. Okay? And so what do we end up with? Okay? How much? Okay? 8,000 bucks. Now that number, in essence, is assuming that we have paid for this property. We're going to make some assumptions here. We're going to complicate things as we sort of go along. But we're going to make the assumption that the property, for the moment, was paid for in all cash, okay? And whatever we paid for the property, we paid all in cash, and this would be the dollar amount on a before-tax basis that we would get to keep as the owner of the property. Does that make sense? Okay? So now, what we need to do is take this number and transform it into what is the value for this particular investment. And this is where it begins, at least in my mind, to start to get interesting, okay? Is that we use something that's covered actually in the text when they talked about net operating income and capitalization of value, is something called the cap rate. All right? And specifically, the formula for this is what I refer to as ERG, okay? Keep it simple to sort of remember it. You have your income divided by your rate of return or cap rate, which gives you value for the property, all right? So in this case, the income that we're referring to is this annual net operating income that we've got right here, all right? So that $8,000 is our income on an annual basis for this property. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have to set some sort of a rate of return to figure out what the value is. Now that rate of return could be a market rate of return, which if you read the chapter on valuation, they talked about market value, and they also talked about investment value and kind of what the differences are there. But if you take sort of all the different players that are out there in the market, all the different investors, developers, that sort of thing, and you sort of average kind of what everybody is sort of thinking and doing, that's kind of the market value, or the market rate, or the market sort of capitalization rate, okay? And so, when you do that, you might find that that rate of return that they're going to expect is, let's say, 6%. Okay, I'm just going to throw that out for the moment. All right, so 6%. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, if we're generating $8,000 a year of income, and we as the market as a whole want or demand a 6% rate of return, what is the value of this property going to be? So all you're going to do is simply take the income divided by the rate to give us the value. In other words, you're sort of just putting your hand over the one you're going to solve for and just sort of follow what's left. 8,000 divided by 0.06. So let's see what we get. We get 133,000 and 333.33. Okay. We'll just kind of round off to 134, or sort of 34. All right, so what we're saying, and this is, of all the things you're going to learn in this class, and you're going to learn about sort of investing in real estate, this is probably one of the most important, okay, of understanding this and understanding this relationship. Everything kind of builds from this and the logic associated with this. So the property is generating $8,000 a year. We're saying the market cap rate or required rate of return is 6%. That would mean we, as a market, would not want to pay basically anything more than $133,334. Does that make sense? Okay. But what if, for whatever reason, you're a player in the market and you don't really need a 6% rate of return, or you don't really care whether you get a 6% rate of return. Maybe you're a nonprofit, maybe you're somebody that just is not looking to maximize their wealth. You're willing to accept a lower rate of return. All right. Well, that means that let me sort of help you think through the logic. If you're willing to accept a lower cap rate, what's it going to do to the value? It's going to make it go up, okay? So if you're willing to accept, let's say, a 5% rate of return, okay? Do the math. 8,000 divided by 0.05. What that means, you could be willing to pay as much as $160,000. That's a huge difference, isn't it? Okay, a 1% difference in the cap rate or required rate of return to make that much of a difference in the valuation on the property. Does that make sense to you, yes or no? Okay, now, what is beginning to happen? Let's just try to put this in practice here for a second. If you've read anything at all and paid any attention whatsoever to the news within the past couple of months, what is beginning to happen to interest rates? They're beginning to go up, yes? They have been down for many years, okay, since probably the 2008-ish time period, and been really, really low. What has that done for the real estate market? It has made the market over the past several years extremely buoyant. In other words, it has helped to raise the prices of real estate. You're saying, huh? Well, because if your cost of borrowing or your required rate of return is really low, that means you can afford to pay more for the property. Does that make sense? Okay, so when you're borrowing money at a really low cost of borrowing, that means that you can potentially afford to pay more. Now put this in a very personal context here for a second. Let's say that you have a job, and your job pays you, I don't know, $50,000 a year, all right? And with that $50,000, you know that you can spend a certain percentage of that on your housing, yes? Okay, and if you take a look at what the textbook sort of talked about in terms of like getting a mortgage, that percentage was roughly what? Do you remember? 30-ish%, maybe 36%, okay, of your gross income. So assuming that's the case, you can spend, 36% of your gross income on housing and so forth. That means that that is a fixed number, if you will, that you can afford to spend on the housing, all right? And that is solely dependent upon your income, okay? And that's independent of the interest rates, okay? So if all of a sudden interest rates go down, what that means is that dollar amount that you can afford to spend goes further. You have more purchasing power because you're borrowing at a lower interest rate and having to make payments back at a lower interest rate, meaning you can borrow more. Does that make sense? Whenever interest rates start to go up, as they are now, what begins to happen is your purchasing power goes down, and that has a direct impact on the market. And so ultimately what you're going to see as interest rates begin to creep up, the real estate market is going to start to go down in value. So what I'm trying to stress here, the big issue, the big point, is this relationship of kind of this rate of return and sort of interest rates and that sort of thing, and its influence on the market as a whole, okay? And you're saying, well, why can't we just keep interest rates at a set level, and why do we have to change them and this and that and the other thing? Well, obviously there are a lot of other things that we're potentially trying to manage, nationally, internationally, and trying to keep inflation down, trying to potentially deal with export, tariffs, and a whole number of other issues. So the point being is, keeping the interest rate at the same exact amount from one year to the next just isn't practical. It doesn't work that way. And so, over the years, we've had extremely high interest rates. I'm an old guy, been around for a while, but back in the 1970s, we had interest rates for houses at 15% interest rates, okay? Now, here, now, today, they're probably around 4-ish% depending on what it is that you're getting, but even a couple of years ago, they were down in the 3 and 2% level. And you start, imagining that as we start creeping up to 5%, 6%, and upwards, what kind of an impact it's going to have on the market. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, now, what else could change? You've only got 3 variables here that could influence value. So other than this rate of return changing, what else could change? There's only one variable left. The income, okay? So the only way that you could potentially, keep your value, sort of constant with a changing sort of required rate of return is you'd be changing your income in the property. But how much control do you have over that? How much control do you have over the rental rate that you set on, an apartment or on a condo or on an office building or whatever? You have some control, but yet probably not enough to make it change to the point of where it's going to influence the value that much, okay? All right, questions? Please, ask questions. Okay, yes, sir.
So how would you calculate, for example, if you have an apartment and you add like more appliances, like better upgrades and stuff, how would you calculate that? Okay, and so what you're saying is, what if we go from like a standard sort of base apartment and adding amenities? Yeah. Yeah, how do we calculate the return on those amenities? So what you're doing is you're looking at sort of what is the marginal benefit of each of those items. So in other words, if we spend an extra, I don't know, $1,000 up front on appliances, what is that going to translate into in terms of increased rent? And so that's what you're actually going to be doing. You're really going to be saying, all right, if I spend an extra $1,000 on appliances up front, what is it going to translate to? Am I going to get an extra $10 a month, in rent? $20 a month? And you're going to basically use the same exact approach. Except the value is just simply going to be, this is going to be the cost of the appliance
And then this would be, and if you want to keep the same return, you're just going to work backwards. So just to use that as an example, you're saying we want to spend an extra $1,000 on this unit up front on appliances, and we want to maintain our 6% yield, then what does that mean that we would have to get on an annual basis in extra income? So what's 1,000 times 6%?
600.
No, not 600.
60.
60 bucks. Okay, so $60 a year, which would be how much per month? Oh, I'm sorry? So exactly what I was sort of saying. That thousand, but the key is, if that $1,000 upgrade will give you that extra $5 a month in rent, or more than $5 a month in rent, it's worth it. But if it only gave you, you actually bring up a great point. What if it only gave you $3 a month extra? It really isn't worth it if you want to maintain that 6% yield. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great answer.
Okay, all right. Other questions? Great question.
But if you were putting in appliances, would they typically look for a 0.06 return, or wouldn't they look for a much higher one?
You could.
Because it doesn't, you know.
No, and that's
make sense.
excellent point. You could. You could sort of parse out and sort of say, okay, what would be the return that we would want to, sort of item by item, to get? I mean, because what happens, especially in a lot of higher end, communities, is they will say, how much more is a person willing to spend, on a month, per month, on, getting crown molding, getting built-in cabinets, getting, stainless steel appliances, getting, whatever it is, and then, sort of working backwards and saying, all right, if they're willing to pay that extra $1 per month, how much can we then afford to spend up front on those items to be able to get that sort of return? Okay, but as you say, it could be that they say, well, on those items, we're going to actually make the rate of return a little bit higher, maybe because, just to pick something out of the blue, that maybe they're using some sort of a financing scheme from maybe like the retailer, where they're having to buy it on credit, maybe paying 10 or 15% a year, as an interest rate, so therefore they would have to get at least that rate of return or higher in order for it to make sense. Okay, great questions. Okay, other questions? All right. So you thought you learned anything yet? Okay, we're moving forward. All right. Now, so let's play around with this just a little bit more. All right. So let's say that we've got a property out there, and that property is on the market for $500,000. Okay, and that's the asking price for the property. And now let me also, once again, if you read the book and you kind of, I'm doing this as I guess in my own way of kind of conveying the information without obviously going through page by page. One of the things that you have to discern between is what is the price of something and whether or not that's the same as the value, okay? Because those are two different things. For example, I could sell you my car at a price of $1,000, okay? But the market value of my car could be $25,000. You follow what I'm saying? But just because I sold it to you, now why might I sell it to you for $1,000?
Maybe you need money quickly.
Okay, maybe I need money quickly. Maybe there is, some other transaction that maybe I'm tying that to maybe another purchase that you're making on something else, and this is, a special deal that you're getting. Because this happens quite often in real estate, where you will have a developer that they're maybe trying to sell off their initial, let's say, condos or houses and that sort of thing, and they want to get the sales stimulated as quickly as possible, And so maybe the first deals that they cut, they want the price point to be as high as possible. All right, in other words, they want to start off the price at maybe being, you know, $300,000. And so what they might do is they might offer some sort of a special financing, where for those first 2 units, they might finance those at a 0% interest rate, okay, to get the sales out there showing $300,000. But then subsequently, once people start buying, then they raise maybe the interest rates, or they have to go to a local lender to get a rate, and that is going to put a little bit of downward pressure, okay? But my point being is, there's a difference between the price and the actual value, okay? The value of something is what the asset should be worth in an open and in a competitive market where all parties are fully aware of what everyone is doing. There's no special deals being cut between anyone. You know, it's a fair, open, honest, sort of transparent system. That is market value, okay? Whereas the price is simply something that may be asked by an owner to the market, or it may be sold at that price, okay? But that doesn't necessarily mean that that is an absolute indicator of market value. Does that make sense? Okay? All right. So let's just go back to our little example here. We've got this asking price, let's say $500,000, and we're looking at this as a potential investment, and we're saying, all right, we demand or require a certain rate of return for any investment that we're going to do, okay? Most investors kind of have in their mind a specific rate of return that they want to generate on an annual basis. Yep.
Would you say that goes based off like interest rates and how much capital
Yes.
they have themselves, like
Yes.
spend on property?
It's going to be based on interest rates. It's going to be based upon kind of their own personal situation. It could be you have a nonprofit that doesn't necessarily need a very high rate of return. It could very well be that you've got an investment fund that is, you know, looking at relatively risky investments and therefore demanding maybe a higher rate of return. It could just be, you know, the average ordinary, you know, person walking down the street that's just simply looking for, you know, a place to park some of their retirement money. So there's all different motivations, all different, you know, mindsets as to kind of how they are assessing the risk of that particular, you know, investment. And so that's, to a certain extent, is going to determine what the rate of return is that they're going to be seeking. All right, so in this case, we just simply are going to pick something out of the air and say, okay, they want a 7% rate of return. Okay? So what does that mean that the annual income that the property has to throw off is going to be? What are you going to do? With all the logic that I used before, cover up what it is you're solving for. So what are you going to do here? You're going to do rate times value. Okay? So in this case, 500,000 times 7%. That's going to be $35,000 a year. In net operating income that you've got to generate. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Yeah.
So now, what we can do is we can kind of start working backwards, okay? And say, if this is what they're asking, and this is what we require for our rate of return, and we're saying it needs to throw off $35,000 a year, what we can actually do is that model that we just put up previously, one where we've got potential gross income minus vacancies and collection losses plus other income gives us effective gross income, subtract out operating expenses, and that gives us NOI. So what we're saying is we know that we need $35,000 of income. Yes? Right with me? And so in this case, we just basically work backwards. Now let's just take this operating expense thing here for a second. Every property is different as to who is responsible for those operating expenses. Now, if you're a homeowner and you like, or just more specifically, if you're, you know, an investor and you own, you know, either single family homes or apartments, that sort of thing, you know, you're going to be responsible as the owner for paying the property taxes, the insurance, property management fees, you know, all that sort of stuff. Everybody cool with that? But what's interesting is that is not necessarily true with commercial property. And what I mean by commercial property, I'm talking about office buildings, shopping centers, industrial properties, warehouses, things like that. In many cases, with those properties, you have a situation of where the owner of the property passes through those expenses onto the tenant, okay? So that if you were to rent, let's say, a shopping center from me, all right, I'd say, okay, the rental amount is this amount, you know, per year, you know, for the space that you've rented. But I would also say you are fully responsible for all property taxes, all insurance, all property management, all, you know, expenses associated with the property, so that I am just simply going to be collecting checks of the rent, but I'm not going to be responsible for any of that other stuff. Does that make sense? And that's what we would call basically a triple net rent. We're going to get into that a little bit later, but right now just kind of be aware that that sort of thing exists. And the reason why that exists is because the landlord, or the property owner, is trying to do what? Make more money, but more specifically, they're trying to push off some of the risk from themselves onto the tenant, okay? So they don't have to deal with that. They don't have to think about that. It's just like, okay, the tenant now is going to be responsible for all that stuff. I no longer have to be responsible for that. That means that I get to keep whatever money is being generated off the property and don't have to worry about that stuff. Okay, does that make sense? So in this case, we're going to make this assumption. This is a commercial property and all the expenses, operating expenses, are being passed through to the tenant. So that means we're going to have a zero there for operating expenses. All right, so kind of working backwards, that means that our effective gross income is going to be $350,000. I'm sorry, not 350, 35,000. Okay. Now, on this property, we also are just going to make the assumption that maybe it has $5,000 of other income that it's generating off of parking fees or other miscellaneous sorts of things that it may have on site that you're going to generate money from. And we're going to make the assumption that there are no vacancy and collection losses. So what does that mean that our potential gross income on this property is going to be? No?
40.
So, well, okay, 30,000. Okay? Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no? Okay, now what we have to do, $30,000 on what amount of space? Okay, when we were talking about like an apartment, we're talking about like one unit, you know, like an apartment unit. But this might be on just a room like this big, okay, or larger, all right? And so we're gonna have to calculate it in most instances on per square foot, okay? Now, in a room like this, believe it or not, we can actually calculate square footage pretty quickly. Anybody have a clue how you would do that? How big are these ceiling tiles? Anybody have a clue? Standard. 2 foot by 4 foot. Okay, so you can pretty much just go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then really 6, so 6 times 4, so 24 feet that way, just for fun. Okay, so 24 foot that way, okay, so this way, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 19 times 2. 19 times 2 is 38. Okay, so 24 feet times 38 feet. Oops, is that right? 24 by 38 is what I said? Yeah. All right, so 912 square feet. Did I do that right? Yes? Okay. Now, how many square feet are most of like a standard apartment?
This would be 912.
It looks bigger, but there are no walls.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Or it looks smaller because there's no walls. That's what I'm saying. All right, 912 square feet, that would basically be the size of a typical 2-bedroom apartment. A 1-bedroom apartment about 600 square feet. Okay, does that make sense? All right, but now let's take this number and actually use it. All right, so if this were the space that we were actually leasing, 912 square feet, $30,000 a year is what we are being charged for the space. So $30,000 a year divided by 912 square feet, okay? $32 and 89 cents, roughly, per square foot per year, okay? Most commercial space, that's how it's going to be quoted, okay? If you pop up on the internet and you start looking at commercial space, almost always it's going to be quoted on a per square foot per year basis, just like that, okay? Now what's interesting, and of course nothing is ever quite simple because everything gets complex, in the residential market, because most rents are thought of and quoted on a monthly basis, they typically will quote the rent not only per unit, but they will also, whenever they quote the per square foot cost, they will do it on a monthly basis. So they would take that number, divided by 12, and say that the rent would be $2.74 per square foot per month, if it was residential, okay? Now, now that would be pretty expensive rent, by the way, per square foot for residential. Like you can look at probably some of the premium properties down in Los Olas, and they're gonna be probably in that $2 to probably $2.50, $2.75 a square foot. But yet, you know, apartments that may be closer to campus, you're probably gonna find that they're probably gonna be in the $1.50-ish sort of range, okay? Maybe even a little bit less, all right? And so we're gonna take a look at some of that here a little bit later. But right now, I'm just trying to get you tuned into some of the ways of sort of looking at some of these numbers and kind of what they mean, okay? Are we good so far? All right? Any questions on this? Sure.
Why would like someone owning a commercial property ever not pass the stock? You know how you said like
Yep.
why would they not?
It's a personal choice, but maybe they want to maintain control for whatever reason, and you know, but most would pass it through. Okay, there are always examples of people who don't for one bizarre, strange reason or another, but for the most part, they do pass it through. Okay, but it also, it's an excellent question because whenever you start looking at properties that are potentially up for lease, and you start looking at these rental rates, if you have one property where it's being quoted, where you have a base rent plus all of this extra stuff, versus another property where it's an all bills paid situation, you've got to basically be able to understand the difference of what you're really dealing with there. I mean, like, think about how many of you either live in a dorm or have lived in a dorm on campus at some point. Okay, dorms are for the most part a perfect case in point of kind of an all bills paid sort of situation, at least with, you don't pay electricity, correct? Okay, you don't pay water, you don't pay sewer, you don't pay for trash, okay? What you do pay is, you know, that's for that base amount at the beginning of the semester, beginning of the year, and that covers not only, you know, obviously your occupancy of the room, but all of those utility costs, yes? Okay, whereas with a traditional apartment, you would have to pay, on top of whatever your base amount is, all of those additional costs, yes? Okay, now part of the reason the universities and whatever sort of lump all that in, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, it's enough, of a challenge for universities to sometimes collect the money and so forth, upfront in one fell swoop. But I mean, imagine trying for every single person that they're going to come around to you once a month and try to get, your utilities from you for electric, water, sewer, and that sort of thing. It would be a nightmare, okay? So, that would be one of the reasons why that they, sort of choose, let's just charge this flat fee up front. And so regardless of the amount of electricity or water or whatever it is that you use, it's just a flat fee, okay? Make sense? All right. But there's an excellent sort of little lesson in there. What if you want to be a developer of student housing? Because it's a different financial model for developing student housing than traditional apartments. And that would be one of the differences in the variables, because you would have to set a different rental rate for dorms than you would for the equivalent apartment on a per square foot basis. Okay? All right, moving forward. Pretty comfortable with this? Yes? Okay. Now, one other thing that, as we sort of talked about this whole thing of value, and we sort of wanted to make the distinction, we sort of said, okay, we have market value, and then we talked about price, and then another is, we said, investment value. All right? Now, once again, market value, overall sort of value determined by all the different players in the market, free and complete flow of information, all that sort of stuff. Price, just simply what the asset may sell for, or potentially priced at by a particular individual. And then investment value may be driven specifically by what is your specific individual required rate of return that may be different than everybody else for some bizarre, strange reason. Okay? You may be willing to pay more for a property than anyone else simply because it meets some very specific criteria that you've set out that you need and you desire. Okay? Or you may have a really low cost of capital. All right, so moving forward. Now, so this takes us through this little exercise that we sort of did here. We're kind of almost working from the tail end sort of backwards. This is what is referred to as the income approach to value, okay? So all of that, we're just going to sort of label. And specifically, one of the terms that they actually use in the book that sort of relates very clearly to this, one of the things about value, is anticipation, okay? And what are we anticipating with this income approach? What are we looking forward to?
Make it fun.
The money that we're generating, okay? And how much money is it going to generate in the future, okay? We're anticipating that income in the future. So it's a forward-looking approach to value. Does that make sense? A forward-looking, sort of future value to a certain extent. And think about the assumptions. That value is dependent upon two variables. The two variables are the income it generates and the required rate of return or the cap rate. Yes? Does everybody follow that? Does that kind of put things in context here for a second? Okay. So the forward or future value is being determined by what is the income that's going to generate and ultimately what is that required rate of return or that cap rate. Okay, so let's take those just for a second. I'm not going to get too much deeper into this, but I really think this is super important for you to think about. Let's say that we've got this investment property and we've set these rents, here today. Are those rents going to stay the same forever? No. They may go up, they could go down, but they could, potentially stay the same. But for the most part, it's going to ride a wave of Basically, if it's a brand new property, it may be priced, you know, at the very top end of the market, getting premium rents, and then a bunch of new product comes onto the market that creates more competition that could very well begin to sort of lower the rate that they're able to achieve, because now there's all this additional competition that's brand new, and this property is maybe 2 or 3, 4, 5 years old, so it's not maybe going to generate as much. So in order to compete with these new properties, this person then has to sort of do the analysis. How much money would we have to spend to renovate this property to make it close to being brand new, and would that pay off for us, you know, to reposition it to, you know, being back a premium property? So, you know, the point being is, one of the things that we've got to sort of do, and we're going to be, you know, doing a little bit later, not today, but later, is looking and projecting what that income stream might be, okay? In other words, we expect the rents to be this amount, $1,000 a month now, but maybe next year we plan an overall increase of 3%. And the following year, we maybe anticipate a 2% increase, and so forth, so on, into the future, and looking at that, financially modeling that out into the future. So the point with that is we're making a lot of assumptions about the future that may or may not come true. And what happens, and why a lot of people, that some people do really well with real estate investing, some people do really bad. One of the reasons that folks do really bad is they do a very poor job of estimating what direction maybe the market is going, whether or not there's going to be that sustained demand, you know, several years out into the future, you know, that sort of thing. And, you know, being able to maintain those rent rates that are being charged now out into the future, or being able to substantially increase them as we go out into the future. Okay, does that make sense? Okay? Think of it like this, and put it in another context. We think we can do all these wonderful things with projections, and what is quite common with real estate is we, in most instances, try to project at least 5 to 10 years into the future what the income and expenses for a property are going to be. That's when we start developing what's called a pro forma statement. We're going to be trying to make those projections up to 10 years into the future for those items. Now, sometimes, I mean, we need to do it in order to kind of paint a picture of what things could be, but yet think about how, to a certain extent, challenging or problematic that might be. I mean, think of it like this. This will probably help to send the point home. How much are you going to be earning as an individual 10 years from now?
$4 million.
Okay, there we go. But my point is, we'd like to think we know ourselves really well, but how well can we actually predict what our own earnings are going to be? You know, we can predict pretty well maybe over the next year, and maybe even a couple of years. But beyond graduation, you know, several years out, you know, what do you really think that you might be earning? You know, and how will you be earning it, and all that sort of thing. Well, to a certain extent, it's very similar to us trying to predict what the income is going to be for a real estate asset 5 years, 10 years out in the future. You know, of real, you know, granted, it has a lot more limitations than obviously a person does, but the point being is there's still going to be these projections that we're being trying to make into the future, okay? Does that make sense? All right? Now, moving forward or backwards. Another approach to value is the cost approach. Okay? Now, one of the handouts that I actually gave you, I gave you a handout on the income approach as well. If you look through the handout, the one that has all the spreadsheets in it, you actually look at the last page of the handout. The very last page. Okay, it's the one that says, Chapter 9, Real Estate Appraisal, Gross Income Multiplier, Net Income Capitalization. Okay, so one of those that we did, the one that we basically spent a lot of time on, is the one at the bottom. The capitalization rate equals net income divided by value. Does everybody see that? Okay, we went into a lot more detail than what's on this little sheet here. But the point being is, That's what the income approach is all about. Now, also on here is another approach called the gross income multiplier, which is just simply, it's a rougher measure of estimating the value. And the reason why that we use that, and we'll kind of maybe come back to it, is when we don't have as much information as we have with the net income approach, okay? So the gross income multiplier approach is a much less sophisticated approach than the net income approach. We're going to come back to that a little bit later. Right now, we're going to kind of peel back the page, the next to the last page, summary of cost valuation, the cost approach. Now, take a look at what we've got here in terms of some of the information on this sheet and kind of the variables that are included. We start off with this estimated production cost. Okay? Anybody have any idea what that might mean? What they're referring to there? Production cost?
Development.
Okay, development in what way?
How much money it takes to build the apartments themselves and furnish them and
Sure. It's basically, it's that upfront cost, okay? The production cost, production value of the hard costs that go into building a new dorm, a new apartment, or a new house, or a new office building, whatever that might be, okay? And if we were to be valuing a brand new dorm, apartment community, so forth, so on, we would stop right there. Because that is the cost. That is what it costs to build. But in most instances, we are not usually valuing something at the time it was built. We're valuing it maybe after it's been used for 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So we have to basically depreciate its value. Because the assumption is, as a property gets older, it starts to deteriorate. In other words, things start to break, things need to be fixed. You know, you need to maybe repaint or recarpet, put in a new air conditioning system, you know, make it more energy efficient, whatever the case may be, but you need to potentially upgrade, all right? Well, in this particular example, and I'm not expecting you to you know, do all these calculations right now in terms of looking at this, but like this first one, under depreciation, it says physical deterioration, cost of repairs like repairing the roof, repainting, exterior caulking, all right? And they're saying that's going to cost you about $4,600. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking that $4,600, subtracting it off the overall cost to rebuild this property. Does that make sense? Okay? But now, here's another thing that I also need to sort of point out. That original cost figure is as of today, if you were to rebuild it as of today. Not what it originally cost whenever you built it 5, 10, 15 years ago. You're going to be looking at what are today's construction costs. Does that make sense? Okay? And so you'll subtract off that $4,600, then you've got to look for the miscellaneous physical deterioration, and you're going to say that's 3% of that reproduction cost. So you're simply going to multiply the 594,000 times 3%, that'll give you that 17,820. You subtract that out as well. And then we have something called functional obsolescence. They're saying that you've got a screen between the swimming pool and the apartment to reduce the noise from the pool, and that is in essence a $4,000 reduction that we're going to have to subtract from the overall value as well. So what that means is you subtract all those things out, and this production cost less depreciation brings the value, current value, down to $567,000 for the property as a whole, okay? Then what you do is you subtract out the land value, or what they're referring to here is the site value of $150,000. I'm sorry, you're adding that back in. Oh, my bad. You're adding that in to the base amount of the construction cost to give you an overall value of $717,500, and then rounding that off to the nearest thousand, $718,000. Okay, so the overall property, we're saying with land value and the overall construction cost is the $718,000. Okay, does that make sense? Now, the thing that is most important here, though, is if the income approach is a forward-looking value, what would you say this value is? Not backwards.
present.
What's left? Sort of the present value, the current value, to a certain extent. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about the last approach, and then we'll kind of talk about kind of reconciling these. So, the remaining approach to value, we call sort of the sales comparison approach. And we would say the sales comparison approach, what's going to be left? This one is forward, this is present, then it is going to be the past value. That's specifically what you're going to be doing. So with the past value, what we're saying is, with the sales comparison approach, this is the one that's going to be most commonly used on any sort of residential property. Okay? This is where you hop on Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever, and you see what properties have sold for within a particular area, and what characteristics that they have, and what they've sold for on a per square foot basis, and try to make adjustments for the differences that exist between those properties. But all of that is historical information. All of it is based on properties that have sold within the past 6 months, the past year, and so forth, so on. So just as a case in point, let's just go back here, see if this is still loaded up. Hopefully it is. Technology is not always our friend. This is scaring me a little bit. Oh, there we go. Good. And there's Zillow. Let's just do it again. And, oops. Okay, here we go. All right, most all of you have probably used Zillow before, yes? Okay. All right, so what we can do, we pick some property at random. All right, we pull it up. All right, so here we've got the pictures of this house. All right, what it's for sale for. They've already, estimated what the mortgage is. We'll talk about how we, get to that number a little bit later. They've got all the different sort of characteristics, when it was built, it's a condo, what the price is per square foot, what the different sort of characteristics are in terms of appliances, so forth, what they estimate the value to be. Okay, so they're saying it's priced at $199,000. They're saying, based upon all the information they have available to them in terms of historical information, the real value is maybe $195,000. I'm not saying that's completely accurate, but that is their algorithm. They're also, interestingly enough, are saying that within the last 30 days, the price has actually gone down, or the value has gone down. What has happened within the past month or so? What's happened with interest rates? They're going up. So you're starting to see that effect immediately within the residential market. Values are beginning to go down. In other words, a month or two ago, we were at the absolute peak of the market. Now, we're going to begin to see a little bit of a decline. Now, how much of a decline? How fast of a decline? Who knows? But at least we're definitely going into, values going down, okay? All right? You can obviously pull up for this particular property, what it basically was sold for, listed for, but you can see in this particular case, in March, they originally had it priced at $210,000, and then a few months later they reduced the price significantly in order to try to maybe move the property, and now we've got a pending sale, so maybe it's actually sold for the $199,000. Okay, makes sense. Now, let's see here. One other thing. So this is another little tool. This is kind of gets into that whole sales comparison thing. What they're basically doing is applying that approach and saying, all right, properties that are similar to this, here is what they have sold for, you know, over the past whatever several months to kind of give you a range. Now the thing is it perfect? No. But what it's trying to do is to give you kind of a ballpark estimate of what the value for this property might very well be. Now this is an interesting thing because just because a property sold for, let's just say, $199,000 last month, does that mean it's automatically still worth $199,000 today?
No.
No. Especially if we've got a rising interest rate environment, that could very well mean that property is now worth a few $1,000s less just because of that one singular issue. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so the point being is that the fallacy or the problem, to a certain extent, with that sales comparison approach is that it doesn't do a good job of potentially telling you what direction the market's going, other than, yeah, you can see that maybe prices are declining over time, but yet, in terms of that information, it's all historical information. It's not really forward-looking, it's basically all looking at the past. But here's the thing. If we said that the income approach is the forward approach, the cost approach is the present approach, and the self-comparison approach is the past approach, do you think that any one of these particular approaches is going to be more heavily used for one property type or another? Like, for example, I kind of already have said this to see if you're paying attention. For residential properties, which one of those approaches is most heavily used? The sales comparison approach. Okay? For commercial properties, like office buildings, shopping centers, that sort of thing, which approach do you think is probably going to be most relevant? Income approach. Okay? So you're learning something, believe it or not. Okay? What about weird specialty properties? I'm kind of giving away the answer, but let's say that you're trying to value something like a church. Okay? Church inherently, I mean, yes, you do have people that are potentially making offerings, you know, and paying money, you know, that sort of thing. But for the most part, how would you go about valuing a church? It'd be really challenging to use the sales comparison approach, because how many churches have sold within the past, you know, year or two? Probably not many. Okay? And the income approach of trying to find out, well, you know, what is the income that the parishioners or the members of the congregation are paying, you know, that's probably not going to work for you. So the only real value approach that you might be able to use for a specialty property like that would be the cost approach, and say, how much would it cost me to rebuild this church, okay, or this school, or whatever the property is. Does that make sense? All right. Now, what we try to do is, for any and all properties that we want to value, we want to apply all three approaches. But what we tend to do is we kind of create a weighted average in most instances and sort of say, if we're valuing like a commercial industrial sort of property, we're going to give the overwhelming weight to the income approach to value. Whereas if we're valuing a residential property, we're going to give the overwhelming weight of the three approaches to value to the sales comparison approach. Now, you're saying, well, why would we not just do just the one approach and, you know, just kind of throw out the other two? Well, it's kind of a, to a certain extent, it's a way of just sort of double checking our work to a certain extent. Of sort of saying, if we apply all three approaches to value consistently for every time we're trying to value any kind of property, then we can sort of, you know, take and say, well, what are the assumptions with each of these, and then ultimately try to reconcile the three to come up with kind of a final standard value. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Now, real quickly, just to kind of walk you through the example in the handout here on the sales comparison thing, and we'll take a little break after this. All right, this one is the one that says sales comparison market data grid. All right, so here, what you've got If you look across the top here, you've got what's called the subject property, and then you've got comparables 1, 2, and 3. Okay, what is the subject property? Anybody take a gander on what that might be?
When you're appraising?
The one you're trying to value, the one you're trying to appraise. All right, so that is the one that you're trying to then compare everything else to. Okay, and so the first thing that you're going to do, whenever you're trying to do this sort of sales comparison approach, is you're going to go out into the market and you're going to try to find at least 3 properties, maybe as many as 5 or more properties that have sold that are similar to the property that has just sold. So what would be some of the similar things you're going to be looking for? The first one is going to be same general neighborhood, yes? What else?
Square footage?
Same general or roughly the same square footage. Lot size being relatively the same. Same school district. What else?
The amount of time it's been sold.
Maybe how long it's been sold, you know, when it's sold. What else?
Age.
Okay, the age of the property. Okay, so you know, to take into account any sort of depreciation that might be there. What else?
Improvement.
I'm sorry? Yeah, improvements, maybe something that's special, you know, that you know, maybe, for example, does it have a pool? Does it not have a pool? Okay, because if the subject property has a pool, you probably want to compare it with other properties that have pools. Yes? Okay. Now that's also sort of an interesting sort of one of the valuation concepts, and we'll kind of break away from this just for a second, is what's called contribution. And we sort of talked about that when we were talking about the value of, you know, adding the nice appliances and that sort of thing. Well, that applies, obviously, you know, if you're looking at a house, you know, one of the things that in many cases people talk about, oh, does that have a pool? Okay, now all of us would say, okay, now, does a pool add value? Does it subtract from value? Does it, I mean, you know, what are your thoughts? Let me just ask you, without me trying to influence you one way or the other. What do you think?
I think especially somewhere like Florida that a pool could be used all year round, it would add to the value.
Okay, all right, other thoughts on the pool thing? Yep,
I feel like it would add value, but it would also add recurring costs and maintenance.
okay, because you're gonna maintain it, okay?
And insurance costs.
Okay, additional insurance costs, you're also maybe going to put up, you know, fencing around it for, you know, safety's sake, okay, you know, what else? But I mean, in terms of okay, first of all, how much, just a standard normal pool, what do you think it's going to cost? Roughly, ballpark.
In ground?
The ground?
Yeah, just in ground pool.
25, 30?
Yeah, at least, okay? So let's just say 30 grand, just a nice number. Now, if you have, I'm not saying that's a roughly inexpensive pool, but the point being is, okay, we've got 2 houses, identical houses, side by side. We have just put in this $30,000 pool in this one does not have a pool. Does that mean that this house, once again, identical to the one next door, is going to sell for $30,000 more just because it has the pool? Even if it's brand new.
Only according to the cost approach, right?
Only according to the cost approach. Good answer, okay? Because from the sales comparison approach, what you're probably going to find is it may only add a fraction to that value. So in other words, it may have cost you 30 grand to put in that pool, but the amount that it contributes, this is, you know, getting back to kind of your point, to the overall valuation, is it may only contribute 10 grand. So you just spent $30,000 on this pool thinking that that's going to add $30,000 worth of value to the property, but it only contributed $10,000 to the value. So that was a bad investment in one sense, if you're just looking at it purely from dollars spent, okay? But yet we can argue, well, you know, now if there's a home that we own for a number of years, we get all the enjoyment out of having the pool and this and that and the other thing, that's a whole other issue. But in terms of upfront, you know, building the property with a pool versus not a pool, it probably doesn't make sense, okay, to build that pool in terms of an upfront out-of-pocket cost. But what else, what might add more value than what it cost? For example, what if you have a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house, and all of the houses in the neighborhood are older homes, all of them are 3-bedroom, 1-bath homes. And once again, a 3-bedroom, 1-bath home here, another 3-bedroom, 1-bath house here. and we decide we're going to add a second bathroom. And it's going to cost us, let's say, $15,000 to add that second bathroom. You right with me? What do you think would happen to the value of the home? Do you think it's going to go up more than 15,000? Be right at 15,000, or it's going to be less than 15,000? I would argue, based upon most data that you're going to look at, it actually is going to contribute more than $15,000 worth of value. Because people want that extra bathroom, and they're willing to pay that much more. So in other words, that $15,000 that you may have spent to put in that extra bathroom could actually make that property be worth, let's say, $25,000 more. So you maybe have a net gain of $10,000 just by adding that second bathroom. Does that make sense? Okay. So the point that I guess I'm trying to make here is, with the sales comparison approach and this whole kind of market grid thing, is that all of these different units of analysis that you can look at in terms of the differentiators between one property and another, you know, are going to have sort of different contribution margins, if you will, to that value. And part of the trick is understanding which ones are going to add more value. In other words, where are you going to get the biggest bang for the buck, to put it in a very simple sort of term. That if I can spend $1 and that's going to increase the value 5-fold versus spending $1 and only getting 25 cents back on the dollar, I'm probably not going to want to do that. Okay, make sense? Okay, so this little grid, let's take a look at it and kind of work our way down through it and try to explain it as best as we can. So we start off with these three properties. This is all, I think, land values. It's not actually building values, it's just land values. And so, or lot values. So you've got the first one that's 30,100, second one's 32,500, and third one 21,600. Okay, so the first thing that you've got here as a unit of analysis is the square footage of the lot size. Okay, and so 9,600 square feet is the subject property. And so what you're going to do is you're going to kind of look across here at your comparables, and you're going to see, all right, the third one is also $9,600. So yeah, it's going to be the most comparable in terms of the size. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to take the size and we're going to divide it by, we're going to take the sale price and divide it by the size. So in this case, taking the 10,000 for the subject property number 1 and divide that by, you're going to take the 30,100 and divide that by the 10,200, and that's going to give you the $2.95 per square foot for the land cost. Okay, and you're going to do that for all three. So the second one will be $2.73, and then the third one will be $2.25. Okay, does everybody understand that piece? Okay, so all you're doing there is just trying to differentiate between the size of the lots to get a per square foot cost for the land. Okay, then what they are saying, okay, we're going to look at the date of the sale in terms of how current is the sale. And so the first one, they're saying the sale occurred 2 weeks ago, so yeah, very current, whereas the other two, a year ago and then 6 months ago. So what they're saying that you're going to do is you're going to make an adjustment to that square footage cost based upon how recent or how old the sale is, saying that if it's the most recent, you're not going to make any adjustment at all because it's a brand new sale, so there shouldn't be any adjustment need to be made. Whereas the old sale, the one that's a year old, you're going to have a 22-cent adjustment that you're going to make, okay? And for the one that's 6 months old, you're going to make an 11-cent adjustment. And they're basing that on that the market has been changing over the past year in terms of the pricing of the market. And so that is a reason for that. So once you make that adjustment, you're simply, in this case, adding that 22 cents to comparable number 2. And so you get the 273 plus the 22 cents gives you that 295. All right? Then the final adjustment that we're making is on the location. So the first two comparables both have lakefront, I guess, views. So there's not going to be any adjustment that you're going to make. And then the third one has apparently an inferior view, and you're making an adjustment there for 59 cents. That, in other words, what it's doing is it's bringing the adjusted price per square foot to where all three of them now, in essence, are equal, to try to give us that this is now the market value of these three lots. It's $2.95 per square foot. So you take that amount, multiply it by the 9,600, and that gives you the $28,326. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, now that's just for the land piece. Okay, question?
Why on the third one you are adding the 59 cents, it doesn't have the lake view?
Okay, because it's inferior to the lake view, therefore in order to adjust it upward to meet the same standard as the subject property, you have to sort of raise the value to meet the same as the subject property. So it's kind of like, another way of sort of looking at this, and sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. Think of it as almost like cars, okay, for example. And you've got, these four cars, one you're trying to value, and then the other three, and let's say there's like a sunroof, okay? So the third one does not have a sunroof, all right? So in order to make the value of that third vehicle without the sunroof comparable to the others that have the sunroof, you've got to spend money to effectively bring it equal. So you're basically going to be adding that component in to then make it equal with the others. Does that make sense? Okay, yes?
How do you determine that value?
In this case, they actually, I think, gave you a little bit of information within the text, but ultimately, it's going to be simply, what you're really doing is you're kind of comparing the others, saying they're equal in every other way except for this, so what is the difference? And they're just basically simplistically saying the only real difference is that view piece, so the adjustment has to be that, whatever, 59 cents or whatever it was per square foot.
Does it compensate? Or?
I'm sorry?
Does it compensate? Or?
Yes, to compensate for that inferior characteristic. Okay? Now, as I said, this is just for land, but what if you start applying it to the actual property itself, to the homes that may be on that property or whatever it might be, then you're going to have all these other units of analysis, like the square footage of the house, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, does it have, let's say, a deck, does it have a pool, does it have exotic landscaping, does it, what school district it is in, all those other things that you're going to then try to measure. And in a perfect world, you try to find, as I said, the most directly comparable property to the one that you're trying to value that recently sold, okay? But what happens if you have a really wacky property? Like you have some custom house that is maybe, the most exotic house in the neighborhood, that's different than all the others, bigger than all the others, has more features than all the others. What do you think, I'm going to get your question here in a second, but what do you think is going to happen to if you're trying to value that home, what do you think is going to happen in terms of the value of that home? Give me perspective.
It's going to probably be appraised lower.
Yes, because it's it doesn't conform with the others. Because that's one of the principles of the valuation process, is we're going to have conformity. And so whenever you have something that's really unusual, it's probably going to, in that case, it may be really nice, but it may not achieve the value that, think of it like this. I mean, the extreme example is you got a mansion in the middle of the ghetto. Okay? Now that mansion may be super nice, but it's in a horrible, terrible location. Okay? So chances are it's not going to sell for the same as what it would if it were surrounded by other mansions. You follow? I mean, that's an extreme, point. But the reverse is also kind of interesting as well. Because what if you have, in other words, the smallest house in a neighborhood full of mansions? Most of the time, the price per square foot is going to be a lot higher for that smaller house. Okay? So it kind of works in both ways, but it's an interesting thing to sort of think of. Okay, question?
So I'm kind of having trouble understanding why you would increase the price of the location, like, you know, the 59 cents, if it has an inferior view.
That's what I was saying about the whole car thing. It's kind of like, imagine that third property is like the car without a sunroof, okay? And so in order to make it like the others, we have to basically pay the price or add in the feature of the sunroof that's going to cost us X number of dollars or X, you know, cents per square foot in this case of the lot, in order to bring it to be equal to the others. We're not saying that the third property is worth 59 cents more than the others. We're actually saying it's less, 59 cents less than the others, okay? But in order to make it comparable to the others, we've got to add that 59 cents to make the value indicator effectively the same. I mean, does that make sense or not? I mean, if it doesn't make sense, I mean, this is probably, and I will be the first to admit, that's probably one of the concepts that is challenging for people to wrap their head around initially when they first, you know, sort of encounter this, is because it's sort of counterintuitive. But, you know, what you're not doing is you're not trying to value that third property per se, you're trying to make it comparable to the subject property. And what adjustments have to be made to that property to make it comparable.
Would that kind of be putting a value on the lake view at
Yes.
59 cents?
Yes, that's exactly what you're doing. You're basically saying that the lake view is worth 59 cents per square foot. That's exactly what you're saying. Okay? Make sense? Okay? All right, other questions? Good. All right. Moving forward. All right, I think after that we're going to take a quick break. So let's take a quick break. So you get out of here for 10 minutes. Not 15, not 5, 10. Okay, so come back at 7:40.
But if he finds out there, when he finds out there's a problem, I'm pretty sure he won't.
Yeah, he'll eat the popcorn.
Sadly.
Yes. There's only 2 exams, midterm and a final.
Oh, there's only 2 tests?
Yeah. The midterm is on the material I cover on the next 2 weeks, and then the final is for the.
And are you going to have like a review?
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, it's going to be pretty straightforward.
Okay, so it's not going to be like really detailed, right? It's not kind of
You'll see as we get a little deeper.
okay.
That's all I can say.
Alright, thank you.
Right, mine is going to be almost all computations, whereas Wordser's, the second half, will be all words.
Okay.
So if you're really good with numbers, you're going to love the first half. But if you're not great with numbers, the first half's going to be a little bit of a challenge. So, how are we doing? You going to be okay?
Yeah, chill.
Good.
It's been a pretty easy going start.
Good.
So,
All the businesses beginning to kind of.
yeah, sort of like unravel within the next couple of weeks. They'll be out and about.
but yeah, okay.
I'll be out and about in a couple of weeks, all working.
Cool. Good.
Now the bar's set pretty high because Paul got to deal with the Panhellenic student government.
Oh, really? To like provide his.
They provide tea in every one of their meetings. I don't
Sweet.
know how often that is, but it's a pretty big amount.
Good. Good. I'm just trying to remember, yours was doing like the paperwork sort of?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any response on that so far, or?
Yeah, I've gotten a couple of clubs in Orange said I'm going to do a couple of sort of like pilot things, so I'm gonna schedule like some of their like general meetings and things like that.
Cool.
This first semester, because they want to see how efficient and all that I am. So when they have their bigger events in the winter and spring semester, then they'll contract me as well.
Nice. So how, I mean, in terms of getting the clients, has it been pretty easy so far, or has it been?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's been pretty easy, especially because I was.
Just sort of hang out in the office and just sort of say, hey, y'all do your paperwork for me, or?
No, because I got in contact before I left. I got in contact with
The job president and things like
the
that?
president
Yeah.
of student government and all that.
Cool.
They've been helping me out and all that.
Nice.
I don't know what that is that all the presidents and all that need to also be there and sort of plug the business there and advertise there when all the presidents and treasurers are there. So that'll also be a good help.
Good. Good, cool. Good, good, good. Yeah.
At least I don't have to worry about cooking that. You guys better, you gotta.
Yeah. I see that this is pasta.
That's what Paul did yesterday. I have that. Yeah, because I bought the salt and peppers, because you guys don't need to with the flavor.
I have my spicy.
I've been adding paprika to eggs when I'm having breakfast because there's no salt and pepper.
Paprika doesn't even have any flavor.
Yeah, it does.
It's good.
Yeah, it does.
You're Professor Forgy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's not the other name.
Wurcher is the other one.
What was the name?
Wurcher. Wurzer.
Okay. That's where are you from?
Texas.
Oh, nice. Never been to Texas. Seems pretty cool though.
Yeah, it's a good place. I moved here 5 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Seems hot over there. Though.
Yeah, it is a
Do
little.
you guys have cold winters?
We do, actually have ice, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, we have the extremes. I mean, in winter, especially in North Texas, you can have several days of ice where it's horrendous to try to drive and get around, and then in the summer, you're gonna have 110-degree days, you know, and it's ridiculous. So it's much more extreme than here.
Wow. Yeah, I'm from Tennessee.
Is it hot there?
Really?
I've heard from multiple Texas
Yeah,
people.
yeah, really.
Gets air in there too.
Well, yeah, different parts of the state, you know, it's like a lot of different climate zones within the state. You know, it's like, you go up in the Panhandle, like in Lubbock, and it's exceedingly dry. And I went to graduate school at Texas Tech up in Lubbock, and you know, after about the first month there, my hands were like bloody, like cracking and whatever. And I honestly thought I had some sort of a skin disease. And then you know, went to the doctor, and they were like, "Oh no, it's just because it's just super dry here. You know, just get some lotion, whatever. You know." But it was just like, that's how extreme, you know, it can be. And then, but then you know, other parts of the state, you know, extremely humid and like especially Houston.
Some of my family lives right outside of Houston.
What?
Humboldt.
Oh yeah, no, right. My whole life in Texas, with the exception that I spent 3 years living and teaching in New Zealand, and several years ago. That was amazing.
So far.
But, Florida is definitely, I love it right here. Wish I would have moved here many years ago. All right, a couple more minutes. Now, how many of you have taken any of the other property management real estate classes before? Okay, any other one? Okay, good. So which ones have you all taken?
Facilities management.
Facilities management.
and property and asset management.
Okay, good. What did y'all do in the the asset management class? Was that with Brett Harris?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we did a couple of case studies, and then like the largest trade was we got in groups, and we sort of like developed went through the whole process of purchasing land, developing the property, and seeing if it was going to be residential or commercial, or a bit of both, and give a presentation about that.
Okay, good. Cool. In the facilities class, that was with JB?
Yeah.
That went well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun guy.
It was awesome. Lit.
What, I'm sorry?
That class was lit.
Lit?
Yeah.
He's a funny dude. He's got a lot of relevant stories.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Well, he's also from Lubbock, Texas Tech, yeah. I'm actually the one that hired him originally, so, yeah. All right, 2 more minutes and we'll get started. All right, get those calculators out. We're gonna kind of start playing around now with how to use the calculator and kind of walk you through some of the things there. And if you don't have one, as I said, you can get an app on your phone. Probably, I think it's just a couple of, did you check to see how much it was? I think it was like $5 or $6, something like that maybe?
Yeah, it's like $4 or $5.
Yeah. All right. So what we're going to do is as follows. We are going to do a couple of things in this class as you sort of play around with the numbers. I want to do that kind of the intro of what we just did to kind of give you perspective on the valuation side of things. But now what we're going to do is kind of begin to explore using the financial calculator. And we're also going to use Excel. So when you've got your laptops, we'll be using that at some point as well. And so what we're going to do is give you some additional skill sets in both using Excel as well as the financial calculator, working through a variety of different kind of calculations. Now, none of this is meant to scare you. None of it's look at it like this. The way that I approach all of this with the numbers, it's not so much about the math as it is about the logic to the math, okay? So for the most part, the only math that you will really have to do is just understand what you need to put into the calculator, what you will need to put into Excel in order to allow the calculator to do its job and obviously the computer to do its job in terms of the actual physical calculations, okay? Does that make sense? So those of you that are a bit number phobic or math phobic or whatever, don't worry, this is, it's not a math course, but you will have to use numbers to get answers to other numbers, okay? So I'm just going to kind of preface it, and from that standpoint. Now, a lot of what we're going to be doing tonight is just getting you familiar with kind of how to use the financial calculator and some basic calculations, some mortgage calculations, loan calculations, and kind of just demonstrate how it works and that sort of thing. Now, one of the things I did not point out earlier that I failed to, I am recording the lecture. And what I'll be doing is each time I'll be posting that on YouTube, okay? And I'll give you the location for it and that sort of thing so that you can go back and then sort of, I didn't quite understand what he was talking about here, or didn't quite understand how he got this calculation, or use the calculator or Excel for this. Well, then you look back at the video and see for yourself, okay? Does that make sense? All right? And that'll be posted pretty much by tomorrow morning, okay? As a general rule. All right? All right, moving forward. And also, if you need to, I didn't mention all that sort of syllabus-y stuff, but you should take a note. You have 2 grades in this class. You have a midterm and you have a final. Midterm is me, okay? 50% of your grade, pretty much all sort of the calculations and the stuff that we're doing tonight and the next couple of weeks. You really only have me for 3 weeks of lecture, if you really think about it. So this week and then the following 2 weeks, and after that you've got a midterm over all that material, which is basically 6 chapters out of the book. Then Wercher comes in, does his thing, you have him for about 3 weeks, and then a final, okay? So it's pretty straightforward in terms of what you have to do. No more than 2 chapters each night. Most of these chapters are pretty straightforward, relatively easy reading with a handful of calculations. Okay? All right. So let's just sort of start out with kind of how we sort of use this sort of financial calculator and kind of what some of the unique things are to the HB 10B2. Now, you are more than welcome to have a different calculator. However, what I will sort of preface this by saying, every calculator is different in terms of how you input the information. So if you don't have the same calculator, following along step by step, you may get lost, okay? So it's probably really advantageous, spend the 25 bucks on Amazon, buy the HB10B, and trust me, you'll love it. It's a great calculator. Basically, this calculator has been in use since 1987, so it hasn't changed a whole lot. All right, same stuff. All right. So let's just start out with the basics. Okay, with this calculator, one of the things that you will see me refer to quite often whenever I will write up on the screen and talk about the shift key. I will say shift and then maybe clear all. All right, and whenever I write this stuff out sort of step by step, I'll be trying to use the same sort of notation every time I sort of do it. So in this case, every time you sort of see this little black box, that's the shift key. On the calculator, that's this orange key, okay? Toward the bottom left-hand side of the calculator, that's the shift key. And what that shift key is doing, just like it does on a keyboard, on a regular like typewriter or computer, is that it's simply accessing the information that is, in this case, sort of below the main item on the keypad. So for example, with the N or the term, the shift key is accessing the number of payments per year, okay? So, whereas otherwise it's just the number of payments. Okay, well, we'll get into that here in just a minute. Okay, but all you need to understand, the shift is just simply, every time I refer to that, it's just kind of a black box. Now, clear all, on your calculator, whenever you hit the shift key and you hit the clear key, it's different than just simply hitting the clear key. The clear key, just by itself, only erases what is in the display at that moment, hitting it by itself. Hitting the shift and the clear all key, that clears out all of the memory registers within the calculator, so it's kind of like you start everything from scratch. Everything is fresh. Does that make sense? Okay, now do this for me. Hit the shift key, then basically hold down the clear key. Now on your calculator, when you hold it down, it will probably, in the display, will have 12 p year or 1 p year. How many of yours says 12 p year? How many of them say 1 p year? Okay, how many of them say something else? Okay, they have to say one or the other. Or not necessarily one or the other, but it has to, more than likely it's going to be one or the other. All right, what that means is, with their calculations, we typically are going to do them one of 2 ways. We're going to do them on an annual basis, which is 1 compounding period per year, or we're going to do them 12 compounding periods per year, or monthly compounding. Okay? And it just sort of depends on how we're looking at the problem as to which one we're potentially going to use. Because in some cases, we're going to look at an annual number, just like we did in some of the previous calculations, looking at what the annual income is. In other instances, we're going to be wanting to look at what the monthly income or expenses are. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so once again, the 1 p year means your calculator is currently set for annual compounding or annual payments, whereas if it's set on 12 p year, that means it's set on monthly. Now, to go from one to the other, what you're going to do, if you want to go to 1 payment per year, you're going to hit 1, you're going to hit that shift key, and then specifically underneath the PMT key, okay, the 4th key over, you will see on your calculator it has payments per year. Does everybody see that on their calculator itself?
Yeah.
All right. So whenever you do this, you hit this one, and I'm going kind of slow. Some of you that maybe want it a little bit faster, we will pick up the pace, trust me. All right, so one shift payment per year simply tells the calculator to make this annual compounding. Okay? Now, to check it, to see if it's actually done that, once you've put that in, if you hit the Shift Clear All key again, those of you that had it as at 12 per year, and you put this in, it should now say 1 per year. Okay? Everybody with me? All right. Now, if you want to make it 12, same thing. Except you just change it to 12 payments per year, and this makes it monthly compounding. Now, here's the thing. Please listen to me on this. Please, please, please. Whenever you start any problem that you're going to be doing in this course, in pretty much any sort of finance kind of calculation, the very, very first thing you need to do is to make sure it is set on the appropriate compounding period, because that will throw your answer off dramatically if it's not set correctly. For example, if your calculator is set for annual compounding, and I ask you to calculate a monthly mortgage payment, and you put in all the information for a monthly mortgage payment, but yet it's left on annual compounding, you're not going to get the right answer, just by following. Or if I ask you, what is the annual return on this particular investment, and you have it set on monthly compounding, you're going to get the wrong answer. So the very first question that you should answer for every single problem that you're going to encounter is it monthly or is it annual? Okay? That's the first mistake everybody's going to make, okay, as you start going through these problems. All right? Moving forward.
Can you press 12?
For monthly, 12.
The number 12?
1, 2,
shift, PYR or PMT?
Shift payments per year, which is underneath the PMT key.
Got it. I don't have a calculator on this, I'm just
Okay.
winging it.
All right. Now, the next thing that we're going to sort of look at are the items on the top row of the calculator. So you've got the M key, then we've got the interest rate key, we've got the present value, payment, and future value. We'll explain each of these. All right. So the N refers to the number of periods that we're talking about for whatever it is that we're analyzing. So when I say number of periods, there's a reason I use that terminology, because it may be number of months, it may be number of years. Okay? So depending on how you have your calculator set, it's going to matter as to what you put in. All right? And you'll see that as we kind of begin to work through this. But that's the time element, if you will. All right? So either the number of periods. Okay? I divided by YR. That's your interest rate per year. Okay? This is sort of the interest rate, but it also could be called your rate of return. It also could be called your yield. There's a lot of different words that it may go by, but think of it as the interest rate. Okay, that's going to be the primary term that we're going to use there, but the interest for the year, that is what that key is going to be representing. So it's going to be kind of a rate of return. It could be what the interest rate is on the loan. It could be, saying, if I make this investment today and I sell it for this tomorrow, what is my rate of return? Well, that would tell us that in terms of, it's a percent, okay? Then we have present value, which is technically what is the value of the property or the asset today in today's dollars. Then we have the payment function, which is what is the income being received or being paid each period. Okay, and all this will become very clear as we start to kind of work through these problems. And then the final one is the future value, which is what is the asset's worth at some point into the future, okay? All right, so let's kind of begin to use some of these and start putting them together into the framework of a couple of problems. Let's start out.
What was PMT again?
PMT is the payment. So it could be like, for example, in real estate terms, that might be the lease payment that you're making to the property owner, okay? But it also, from the property owner's perspective, it's a payment they're receiving. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about here when we talk about using the calculator, you've got two perspectives. You always have two perspectives with the calculator. You have, in essence, sort of the giver and the receiver, okay? And in each transaction, you know, it may be different. Like, for example, assume that I'm a lender, all right? If I'm the lender and you're the borrower, okay, whenever you make monthly payments, that's going to be a cash outflow to you, a negative amount to you, yes? But to me, as a lender, it's a positive. It's just the opposite. It's going to be an income to me. It's an outflow to you, income to me. We're saying, oh, who cares? Well, it's going to matter because we need to know who is receiving and who is giving from the standpoint of whenever we start to set up payments, we need to know which direction it's flowing.
Is it minusing or adding?
Yes.
And how would you do that on the calculator?
I'm going to show, I'm definitely going to show you. I'm just trying to get conceptually, just make sure you understand the whole thing of there are always two perspectives. And so if you're looking at it from the lender's perspective, it's one perspective. If you're looking at it from the borrower's perspective, it's the opposite perspective. Okay? And then same sort of thing if it's a landlord-tenant relationship. You know, that once again, the tenant is paying the rent, landlord is receiving the rent. Okay? All right. Okay, so let's just do a really simple one. And something that all of you, I would think, would relate to, a car payment. Okay? All right? So first of all, car payments are made how often? Typically monthly. So what are we going to do? 12 payments per year is how we're going to start this problem off. Okay? Now, here's the thing. With each of the variables that we've got the following variables. We need to know the duration of the loan. In other words, the time element. We need to know what interest rate the car loan is. We need to know the dollar amount of the actual car loan itself. And then we want to calculate the monthly payment. Does everybody understand? Now, here's the thing. With the calculator, it does not matter the order in which we put the inputs. So in other words, we could input the time first, then the interest rate, then the loan amount, or we could put the loan amount, then the interest rate, then the term. We could put the interest rate, then the dollar amount of the loan and the term. That part doesn't matter. What does matter is what we're solving for, which is the payment, has to be last. Does that make sense? Because that's what you're solving for. You've got to have the three input variables before you can have the output. Make sense? Okay, you'll see in a second. All right. So let's just start, and you feed me some information. Okay? How big of a car loan do we want to get, dollar amount wise?
20,000.
20,000. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put in 20,000, and that is going to be our present value or our loan amount. Okay? Everybody good with that? All right. What interest rate do we want to get charged on this car loan? 4.5%. Okay, you're going to put in 4.5 interest rate. Okay. How long of a loan? And we can do this in months or in years?
60 months.
60 months. Okay. So now here's where you have a choice of how you enter this. You could enter that as 60 in, which would be 60 periods or 60 months, because we've got it set up for 12 payments per year. Yes? Or you could put it in as 5 years, but put it in as 5 shift in. And what happens is whenever if you were to put it in as 5 shift in, it automatically converts that 5 years times the number of payments per year of 12 payments. And so you will see in your display, if you were to put it in as 5 shift in, it will pop up 60. Okay, does everybody follow that? That makes sense, everybody? Yes, no, possibly could be. Okay, now, okay, so from there, what's the last piece? What are we solving for? Payment. So you just hit the payment key, and you're going to get a negative number that will be your monthly payment. All right, so let's just maybe do it over here on this one. All right, so we've got 20,000 as our present value, 4.5 as our interest rate, and we said 5 years, so 5 shift in 60 months. Solve for payment.
Is there any way you could redo that?
372.86. Okay. Oh. Okay, what was the question? I'm sorry.
So on the calculator, you're just clicking like each individual button and then typing in that number then?
Yeah, that's what you're doing, just like I've got it written up here. So you're typing in exactly as I have it written. Okay, so 12 shift payment per year, 20,000 present value, 4.5 interest rate, 60 in, or 5 shift in, and then payment. Okay, so I'm matching with this number. If you're not matching with this number, let me know now, so we can try to fix your situation. Because if you're not matching now, it's going to only get worse. Okay?
Wait, are we supposed to be like adding it? Or you literally just put it in?
Just
and
plug
then-
it in.
You're just putting it. Think of it like this. Okay, you know,
Yeah,
just
mine's
okay.
just saying 60 at the end because I did 60 at.
Yeah, that's all. And then you press the payment after that.
That would be it. Nope. Oh yeah. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Think of it like this. I mean, the easiest way to sort of think of this is it's like, you know, you've used things like in regular math, like quadratic equations and things like that, and all you're doing, just like you would with any other sort of equation, is you're just basically putting in, here are the variables of the equation, here's what we're solving for. That's all you're doing. There's actually a formula for this. You know, back whenever I was in school, you know, some 30-odd years ago, we actually had to do it using the formula instead of having to use a financial calculator, heck of a lot more detailed, you know, in terms of the math. And so, yeah, it was horrible. Okay. Took a lot more time. And so from that standpoint, you got it easy. All you got to do is understand what you're actually being given and how to solve it. Okay, so now you know. $20,000 loan amount, 4.5% interest rate, 60-month term, that would be your monthly payment. Okay, everybody understand that? Makes sense. Nice warm fuzzy feelings inside. Okay? All right, now, what if another dealership potentially had a lower interest rate they were able to offer you? How might that impact things?
We'll go there.
Well, yeah, ideally you would go there, but how would that impact things? Well, so for example, if you could get a full % lower in the interest rate by going to another dealership, so all you would have to do to modify is put in 3.5%, let's say it's 3.5%. You don't have to change anything. Just after you've solved for the payment here, just follow through. Don't erase anything. Don't do anything else. Just type in 3.5 as your new interest rate, and then hit payment again. That will be your new payment amount. So your payment doesn't drop a whole lot. Drops down to $363.83. So in this case, yeah, you save about $9, okay, a month. But $9 a month over 60 months, yeah, it's a little bit of a savings. But the point being is, that's all you have to do to change one of the variables is just replace one of the input variables with a new dollar amount or new interest rate, and then solve for what is, and so you can keep doing this, okay? So for example, what if they have a deal going that's a 0% interest rate? Okay, put in 0 as your interest rate, now solve for the payment. So that's the lowest your monthly payment could ever be, would be $333.33 a month. Why? Because, I mean, now this is where you start to begin to, once again, wrap your head around this. $333 a month times 60 months would be what? $20,000. So all you're really doing is, with a 0% interest rate, you're just taking the $20,000, dividing it by the 60 months, and saying that's how much you have to pay back each month without interest, would be the $333. Anything above and beyond that $333 is your interest cost. Make sense? Okay, any questions about that? Now already, hopefully you know more than what you did when you came in the door. Yes? Okay. All right. Now, let's swing this a different direction. Okay? Now let's clear everything out. So we're going to do the shift, clear all, to clear everything out. Because what would happen now is if we kept putting in more information, that sort of thing, the calculator still has, see, this calculator, one of the cool things about the onboard calculator, or the one I've got up here, is it actually shows you what is currently in, well, in this case, the in value, the present value, and the payment right then and there. I mean, obviously yours doesn't do that in terms of the display, but that's really cool because that just sort of shows you, if I don't clear the calculator out, all of that stuff is still there. Okay? And it's still there in your calculator, my point. So by clearing it out, you'll see whenever I hit the shift and the clear all, now all that goes back to 0. Okay? Everybody follow? All right. So now let's approach this a different way. Because this is what typically, if we're going to use this car example, I know it's a real estate class, but I also know from many years of teaching this that you guys relate more to car examples initially than you do to the real estate examples, because you've had probably more experience with getting maybe a car or a car loan and that sort of thing than maybe you've had buying real estate. But the principles, the calculations are identical, okay, is my point. So if you're saying, why are we learning about car loans and this is a real estate class, trust me, it is, you're going to see as we migrate very quickly into the real estate loans, it's the same stuff. But it's just easier for you to initially get your head around the car loan stuff. Okay, so let's say that you walk into a dealership, and usually one of the first questions that they will ask you is, how much of a monthly payment can you afford? Okay, that's usually the very first question that they will ask you whenever it gets to the point of kind of what it is that you're wanting to buy, or, you know. So tell me, okay, we did some calculations over here with, you know, figuring out what the actual payment would be, but what if it was the other way around? What if we went in there and we were just simply asked, okay, what dollar amount do you think you want to pay each month? Okay, give me a dollar amount. 500. That's what he wants to pay. I'm not questioning him.
Okay.
All right, $500 a month. So what we would do is we would put in 500, and this is a good way to sort of demonstrate something else. We're going to put in 500, we're going to hit the change sign key, and then we're going to hit payment. Now, the change sign key is over here on the left-hand side, 4 keys down, and all that's doing is making a positive number a negative number, okay? And the reason why we're making it a negative number is because, as we were sort of talking about earlier, a payment that we're going to be making as a borrower to the lender or to the dealership or whatever is going to be a cash outflow from our perspective, therefore a negative number. Thus is why, whenever we were doing these calculations earlier, you're seeing these numbers come out as negative numbers. You're probably like, oh, that's the wrong answer. No, it's just simply indicating that we are, in essence, getting a $20,000 loan as the borrower, or $20,000 worth of value from the car, and then in return, we have to pay the $372, okay? Makes sense? All right, so here we're reversing that. We're saying $500 is going to be the monthly payment. That's going to be a cash outflow to us, all right? Now, what interest rate do we want to have? 3? Okay? Yep.
Can you just put in minus 500?
No.
No. Okay.
So 3 or 3.5? 3. Okay. All right. So 3 is going to be the interest rate. Okay. How many months? Could be 24, could be 36, could be 72, could be whatever. What do you want to do? 24. All right, so 24 months. So we can input that as 24 in, or let's see if you're learning, how else can we enter it? 2 shift in. Okay, 2 times 12 months a year, or 24 months. Okay, all right, so when we do that, now what are we solving for? We're solving for the loan amount or the price or present value. Okay? So we simply get the present value. All right, let's see what we get. All right, so we've got $500 as our payment amount. We have 24 months, and we have a 3% interest rate. Solve for present value. So the vehicle here would only be $11,632.99 rounded. Okay, would be our loan amount. Does that make sense, everybody? Now, so you're saying, well, wait a second. This car payment's more expensive than that one. How is it that my loan is less? Well, because it's only for 24 months. Okay? You can't expect that over 24 months you're going to get, obviously you'd be able to pay back as much as you would in 60 months. So what if, let's just sort of play that angle. What if we extended this loan from being a 24-month loan to a 60-month loan? Okay? $27,826.18 rounds. Okay? Does that make sense, everybody? So all we're doing is now just saying, okay, we're going to make that 2-year loan, basically a 5-year loan, keeping the payment same at $500 a month, and our interest rate the same at 3%. But what if now, all of a sudden, we find out once again, another interest rate that's lower somewhere else, maybe we get a 0% interest rate. So put in 0 as our interest rate and solve for our payment. So $30,000 would be the maximum amount that we could get with a $500 a month payment for 60 months at 0% interest. Once again, simple math, 500 times 60 months is what? 30 grand.
Some lenders do like, you don't pay interest for like the first year. Does that calculator do that?
We can show you how to do that. I guarantee we can show you how to do that, but not tonight. So that's one of those tangents that we get off on, and we'll spend a little bit too much time there. Okay. Other questions on this? Are we comfortable with this? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Any issues, problems, comments? Are you all matching whenever you're doing the calculations? No.
For some reason, I keep getting different numbers though when I'm typing the same stuff.
How different?
I'm getting like 10,621
instead of
11,000.
Is the word begin in your display?
Is the what?
Word begin, B-E-G-I-N. Is it in your display? One second. Oh, this is you have it set for 3 payments per year. I'm going to change it to 12 payments per year. 12 shift. Okay. Okay. All right. Is all good? Okay. Now, let's switch this over. Since we did the car thing, now let's do more of a real estate thing. All right. So, 12 payments per year. All right. How much of a mortgage do we want? You know, we're going to find a house or a building, and we're going to need to get a mortgage on it, and we'll talk about all the details, but you know, we're going to put a little bit of a down payment, that sort of thing. But right now, we're just going to focus on the mortgage piece. So, how big of a mortgage do we want to get? Give me a dollar amount. Be a big amount, be a small amount, doesn't really matter. Give me an amount.
400.
400,000. Okay, so 400,000 is going to be the loan amount, all right? What sort of interest rate? Just give me a number.
4.5.
4.5. So much work. Okay, 4.5.
4.9 since we already did 4.5.
Okay, I can do that. We can erase that. Okay, 4.9. All right, now, what's the return? Now, normally, I just wouldn't kind of throw this out there at you. Normally with real estate loans, the payments are typically, or the term is typically going to be 15 years or 30 years are the two predominant ones, at least for residential. Doesn't mean you can't have something other than 15 years or 30 years. It just so happens that those are the most dominant ones, okay? So, I mean, you could have 20 years, you could have 5 years, you know, but the point being is normal, standard, traditional residential mortgages, typically 15 or 30, okay? What do you want to do? Give me a number. 15. Okay, so 15, shift in, or how many months would that be?
180.
180. Okay. Everybody good? All right, now, what are we solving for? The payment. Okay, over here. Yep. 15 years. And got the payment. Okay. So our monthly payment on this mortgage is going to be $3,142.38 rounded. Okay? Okay, is everybody good with that? Yes? Okay. Now, just out of curiosity, just to see if you're kind of following along, how much in total would you be paying back at the end of the 15 years? In other words, all of your payments combined, how would you get there?
400,000 times 4.9.
No. Good try, but no.
Multiply your payment by the payment periods?
Yes. So multiply the 3142.38 times 180. Because you're making this payment 180 times, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just see what that would be. And this is where it starts to get a little bit sickening.
To see how much we're actually.
Okay?
Ooh.
565,627 and some change, 84 cents and change. Now, once again, just seeing if you're paying attention. How much interest did we pay?
165,000.
How much interest did we pay? We borrowed 400. We're paying back in total 565.
165.
Yes. So in other words, that's the total amount we paid. If we subtract out the loan amount of the 400,000, the remaining 165,627.84 is the interest piece. Is that not just a little bit disgusting? Okay. I mean, just from the standpoint, that's a lot of money. Okay. Imagine that interest rate goes a little bit higher. It's going to be that much more money. Okay. All right. Are we good? Yes? No? Possibly could be.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's kind of approach it a little bit differently. Okay. Let's approach it sort of like in your textbook, sort of the spreadsheet number 3 that I gave you, the one that has the Mallory's monthly payments. To the third one. The Mallory's monthly payments. Starts off, the first thing has like car, furniture, appliances, all that sort of stuff. Everybody see that one? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to kind of try to see if we can sort of match up with what they've got here based on what we've just done. All right, so in this case, for these folks, real simply, I'm not going to try to, so we get the car, $450 a month. We've got furniture for $200 a month. We've got revolving credit of $300. We've got student loan of $150. We add all those up together, that's $1,100 a month. Okay, so that's right there, obviously, on the sheet. Now, all the purpose of calculating all of that is that when you go to get a mortgage loan or a residential mortgage, they're going to be looking at all of the other monthly recurring expenses that you have whenever they are trying to determine how much you can afford. Does that make sense? Okay, because, like, for example, if you didn't have any of those, you didn't have a car, you didn't have, you know, furniture you're paying off and a revolving credit, like a credit card, and you didn't have student loans, that would be an extra $1,100 a month you could actually put toward your mortgage. Does that make sense? Okay. But because you have that, that basically reduces your purchasing power or reduces the amount that you can actually borrow. Okay? All right, so we got that. Okay, so this next little set of calculations that we've got here, we've got your monthly gross income, we say is $7,100, and then what the standard that they're using, or the typical standard is to say that roughly 1/3 of that can be spent effectively on the mortgage payments, okay? Or total, I mean, once again, before we subtract out all of the other stuff. So 1/3 of 7,100, so 7,100 basically divided by 3, so 2367, okay? We would be subtracting out, all right? Then we have to subtract out these other commitments, which they're referring to as the sort of the other payments of 1,100, and that's going to leave us with this 1,267.14 that we will have available for our mortgage payment. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Wait, so what's the 1/3 again?
The 1/3, okay, in your text and also as a standard matter of practice, most mortgage lenders set kind of a specific ratio of your gross income that they say can be used for a mortgage payment. So they're basically saying, whatever dollar amount you earn on a monthly basis, you should spend no more than 1/3 of that on basically sort of housing and related sort of monthly payments. That's what they're saying.
So why would that be 2367, but the available would be 1267?
Okay. 7,100 divided by 3, or 1/3 of this, is 2367. But then from that, what we're saying is, of the 7,100, then they're saying that you've got to subtract out this 1,100 of other payments that you have on a recurring basis every single month that is reducing basically your available cash to be able to spend on your mortgage. Because what they're basically saying is that other 67% of gross income, probably 20 to 30% of that is going to be income taxes. And then the other 20 to 30, 40% is going to be eaten up by food, clothing, entertainment, you know, whatever else. And so it's an industry standard that they sort of use this kind of 1/3 of your gross income as the number. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, some lenders may go as high as like 36%, but 33% or 1/3 is typically the norm. Okay? Other questions on that? Okay? All right, so that leaves us with 1267.14. So that, in essence, is the amount we, or they, can afford to spend on their monthly mortgage payment. Everybody cool with that? Yes or no? Okay, so you take a look kind of what's left there, they're telling you they can get an interest rate for 5% for 30 years, okay? And then based on that, they can get a loan amount of 267 or 265,000. So let's just see if we match up with that. Okay, so how would we set this up? 12 payments per year. And then we would put in 12, 67, 14 as our negative payment. Yes? 5% as our interest rate. 30 shift in or 360 months. Okay? Everybody follow me? And then we're going to simply solve for present value. Now, hopefully we match up. Let's find out. Okay, so 12, 67, 14. As our payment, 30 years as our term, interest rate of 5%, solve for present value, we get, oh, hold on, that mess, 1267. Why is it not matching? What am I doing wrong? Should match. I'm missing. 416, 2, 5%, years, and then 1425. What am I doing wrong?
Is it just because 130, 70, 100 isn't 23, 67, 14?
Did I screw that up?
23, 66, 67.
Yeah, that shouldn't be off that much though. That is a really good question. I'm going to have to pull up the spreadsheet to see what I did wrong. I did something wrong. I apologize. What about in the book? Let me just double check that. I actually used the same example just to make sure. Comes to this switched up. I usually don't make too many mistakes. 12. Okay, I see. That's right.
Isn't the payment more in there than it's closer?
It's 1267 in the book, for the, oh. I'm gonna have to investigate that, I'm sorry, I'm gonna look at the spreadsheet, but we're doing the calculation in terms of coming up with what the answer should be. I must have put something wrong where I,
For 5 years instead of 30?
no, it's 5% interest rate for 30 years. That part is right. We're off, I'm just gonna have to find out what we did wrong. What I did wrong on the spreadsheet, but it should be 230, what was it we got?
Yeah, but isn't the payment 1,267, and on that thing it says 1,400?
Trying to see like what the absolute value that they could afford, right?
Yeah. So, okay, that bit, okay, 1267, 14 as the payment,
Yeah, before it was
5%, 30 years, 236. What am I doing? Anyway, I'm gonna have to find out what I did wrong, and I'll let you know that that is the correct answer, the 236. I must have, when I put it in the spreadsheet, I created the spreadsheet, so I did something wrong. My apologies for that. I usually don't make those kind of mistakes. 236,044. All right. So getting bogged down in that, let's just sort of accept that is the correct answer for that dollar amount for the payment. Okay, does that make sense? Yes? So in other words, okay.
Are you trying to, like, isn't it supposed to figure out that she can do 1,267 at most a month?
Correct.
For the mortgage?
Correct.
So
at 5% for 30 years.
Yeah, so over 30 years. So we should
Correct.
see what she can have after those 30 years.
Well,
Or
no,
the absolute most price, if she could afford $1267.
this is simply saying, this is the maximum mortgage amount that she would be able
Right.
to get at the present with that monthly payment, with that interest rate, and with that term.
Now,
It's possible, so I created that spreadsheet from scratch, and there's a very good chance I put in one of the formulas wrong on the Excel spreadsheet, and so that's what it is. This, I've calculated it twice now, and we're getting consistent numbers, so my assumption is this is correct. Okay? If not, we'll deal with that later.
I mean, I'm just doing it by this, without the scientific calculator. If you do 12 months in a year, right? 12
Right.
times 1267, which
Yeah.
equals 15,000. 15,000 times 30 years, that's already over 400.
Right, and that's including interest.
That's including the interest.
This
yeah.
is just simply the.
No, actually, that doesn't include the interest. Including the interest, it'd be like.
No, if you multiply 1267.14 times 360 months, that would include interest.
Yeah, I'm just doing it with a regular calculator.
Understood. Okay, all right, question?
Just, I just went backwards with the number that you do
Yep.
have for the,
Yep.
loan amount, and she would have to pay, or her monthly payment would have to be $14.24.
Yeah, so like I said, something, somewhere I screwed up on that. My apologies, okay? All right, let's move forward and not get bogged down in this. Okay, so this would be the dollar amount of the maximum loan that she would be able to get. And then the final step, sort of basically, in this case, we're saying, well, what if she had to put a 5% down payment? This is the loan amount, and she has to put a 5% down payment. What would that mean the maximum home purchase price would be? Okay, so how do we get there? Okay, well, if this represents, this would be one little piece of math that we kind of have to sort of think about. If the whole of 100% is the purchase price of the home, and she's putting down a 5% down payment, what does the $236,000 represent? 95%, yes? Okay, so what you can do to work backwards in this is to take the $236,044 divided by 95% to give you the 100% amount, all right? So divided by 0.95 would give us 248, 468, okay? And then to get the actual 5% down payment, then we would take that, multiply it by 0.05, and so the actual down payment would be $12,423. Okay? But the whole price of the home, including the down payment, would be this $248,468. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no? Okay, sorry for that little error, and I'll figure out what the heck that was when I look at the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, let's move forward. Okay.
And real quick, these would all just be normal fixed rate 30-year amounts, or whatever years, right? This isn't.
In this course, yes. Or at least for this portion of the course. Because one of the things that we can do, I don't think we're going to probably try to do it in this course, we're going to do it in the master's course that we teach in real estate finance, but we can have adjustable rate mortgages. We can also have prepayment penalties, loan origination fees, and a whole assortment of other things that can enter into this. But for the most part, what we're really focusing on here is just a sort of the standard, normal, vanilla kind of mortgage. Yep.
How did you know the present value was only 95%?
Because we're making the assumption that it was going to be a 5% down payment. And so if it's a 5% down payment, then that means this is going to represent 95% because the entire property is 100%.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the second spreadsheet. Okay? This one will begin to make a lot more sense now that we've kind of played around with some of this. Okay. Now, this particular particular spreadsheet is, like I said, it's taken out of page 306 of your book. I've modified it a little bit. But what you've got here is a nice little model that, if you take a look specifically kind of on my sheet here, I've got these 3 cells that are in yellow. You don't have them in yellow on your sheet, but I'm going to point them out to you. The one up here at the top, just sort of circle this, the term of the loan amount, and then down here under the interest rate, circle the 4%. Okay? Those are your 3 input variables. Everything else on the spreadsheet is calculated from those 3 inputs. Okay? In other words, once again, the term of the loan, the 30 years, the loan amount of $200,000, and the interest rate of 4%. And I've sent you all these spreadsheets, by the way. You get them in the mail?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can actually pull them up and play around them. And the way that I set my spreadsheets up, just so that I'm relatively consistent, where you can see the colors on the screen in the spreadsheet, the yellow cells are the input cells, okay? And then pretty much everything else is an output cell. But like some of the other spreadsheets you'll see, there's like yellow and green. The ones that are green are output cells, meaning that you don't have to touch them. They've got formulas in them, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, but this one, it's pretty much everything else is an output other than those 3 cells. Okay, so what this table is doing, to kind of just illustrate the concept of some of the stuff that we've actually been calculating, is look at the impact that the interest rate has. It's a standard, $200,000 loan for 30 years, but that interest rate, if it's at 4%, your principal and interest payment is at $954 a month. But if that interest rate goes up to 10%, it's now $1,755 a month. So, same dollar amount for the loan, same term, but the interest rate, you can see, for each 0.5% as you increase it, how much that influences what that principal and interest payment is. And that's what that, when you see the word, or where it has PI, payment, the PI stands for principal and interest. Okay? Everybody cool with that? All right, the next column over is the principal amount or portion of that initial payment that is attributed to the repayment of the loan or the principal amount. Whereas the next column is how much of that initial payment goes to interest. So in this particular case, let's look at that one that's 4%. Of that $954.83 principal and interest payment, of that, $288.16 goes toward the principal repayment, or the actual face value of the loan, repaying that month after month after month. The remaining $666.66 is interest. So what you're seeing is literally 2/3 of your initial payment is going toward interest. 1/3 is going to the payment of the loan. Now, here's the part that's interesting about this. And you're saying, well, is that the case then every single month throughout the whole loan? No. What happens is, over time, that payment, the principal and interest payment, stays the same, but in subsequent months, as you have paid off bits and pieces of the actual principal amount, you are, in essence, owing less to the lender. Therefore, over time, the portion that is attributed to principal increases significantly month after month after month, and the amount of interest that you're paying proportionally each month goes down. It's at the beginning of the loan is kind of the worst case scenario in terms of the percentage of the interest that you're paying up front each month, whereas as the loan matures, then this amount will go down, 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 this one will go up, 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 and this stays the same. In other words, your monthly payment stays the same, but the allocation between these two changes over time, yes.
So this table is strictly based on the first payment?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
For
Okay,
how many years?
30 years.
I know, but for how many years?
Oh, no, it's only that payment allocation for the first month.
Oh,
Every month is different, and we're gonna show you that, okay? But right now, it's gonna just illustrate the concept. Okay, so there we've got the principal and interest payment, the principal and the interest. Then what they've done is calculate what is the term total, just like we've done previously, which is simply to take this amount, the 954.83, and multiply it by the total term of the loan of 360 months. $343,738. Okay, and that was off by $1 and a penny, and the only reason there is we rounded. Okay, that one I know for 100% certainty. That's the only issue there. But you see the point. Term total. That's simply saying all principal, all interest for that loan will be $343.70 or $343,738. And then the next column, the loan paid. That's going to be the same for all of them in this particular example because they're all $200,000. And then you subtract that, and then you should get the 143, basically 738, 739, do the rounding. Okay? Does that make sense, everybody? So what you can see with this particular spreadsheet is, as you sort of just start looking down the page. So with that 4% interest rate, just to kind of put things into perspective, the 4% interest rate, you're paying $143,000 in interest. If that interest rate is 10%, you're paying $431,000. You're paying twice, more than twice, the dollar amount of the loan in interest. Okay, does everybody follow that? Yes or no? Okay, so this is why not only you as individuals, whenever you're obviously searching for loans for properties that you're wanting to either, for your own personal residence or investment properties, the number one thing you try to do is to obviously get the lowest interest rate you can possibly get. But that having been said, and I don't want to get too deep into this because, I don't know that the value is there, but all lenders are not created equal. Let me just make sure that I'm very clear when I say that. Think of lenders as retailers, because that's what they are. They really are retailers in the sense that they're just like Walmart or Walgreens or CVS or Publix or whatever. Each one has a different deal to try to pull you in as a customer. Okay? They have something on sale. And just because Wells Fargo has the best deal on home loans doesn't mean they have the best deal on car loans. Doesn't mean they have the best deal on commercial loans for office buildings. Because here's what happens. This is sort of buyer behavior. Think about it like this. You spend some time searching around these different lenders, and you find the one that has the best deal for whatever it is that you need right then and there. A home loan, business loan, car loan, whatever. You provide them with an extraordinary amount of paperwork about your background, your tax returns, all this other sort of stuff. You go through all the brain damage necessary to be able to secure this loan. Chances are, the next time you need a loan, you're going to say, I really don't feel like going to another lender and having to go through all this brain damage all over again. I already have a relationship with Wells Fargo or with Bank of America or whoever. They already have all my information, and so I'm going to use them again for another loan. But here's the point. That other loan may not nearly be as good of a deal as that first loan because they've already got you as a customer. You follow? I mean, that logic, trust me, it holds a lot firmer than you think it would, because it's just like, you as an individual, whenever you start going out there and you start, once again, You know, when do you get a loan for your boat? When do you get a loan for your house? When do you get a loan for home equity? You know, all, you know, and all, you tend to think, you know, the same lender over and over and over again. But the reality is, they're probably offering you a great deal on one of the products, but then the other products, they're sort of making up for it by potentially charging you a premium relative to the competitors out there. So the point being is it actually does pay to kind of take a look around at what those interest rates may be. Plus, there's another feature to this. Think about, at some point, you're a real estate developer. You're working maybe for a company that owns hundreds of thousands of units of apartments or square feet of office space or shopping center space, whatever it might be, and you need to maybe refinance a building or to purchase a building. And if you're talking about a property that's, let's say, 50 million or 100 million or more, think about if you see how much of a difference the interest rate makes on a $200,000 loan, think about how much of a difference it makes on a $100 million loan. Huge. So huge, exactly. So huge that it basically would more than pay probably 2 or 3 persons' salaries for a year just to get that slightly lower interest rate. You follow me? Okay. All right, let's do this. I can see you're starting to get a little itchy twitchy. So take a quick 5-minute break. Okay. Just get up, walk around, get something to drink real quick, come back, and we've still got a little bit of stuff to go. All right. I know. It's getting late, but we've still got a little bit more stuff to go through. I'll try to make it fun. Come on. Get up. Go. Quick break. Just think of it like this. You only have to endure me for 3 sessions. Okay? Tonight and 2 more weeks. After tonight, 2 more times. What? Well, for me, and then Worcher comes in. Dr. Thomas Worcher. W-U-E-R-Z-E-R.
Is he German?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Who are you, Maddie? Aren't you part of the Shark Cage? No?
What is it?
Okay. I thought you were part of Shark Cage.
No.
Oh, okay. You look like somebody that's part of Shark Cage. Okay. Well,
I just heard the accent. I'm from Germany
gotcha.
too, so.
Ah, okay. Well, then you guys will get along, I'm sure, extremely well. And trust me, I know how brutal this is. I'm going to sit here for 4 hours. I get it.
Do you keep it until like 10?
9:45. So let's say 1 hour from now. But we've got a lot of stuff to get through. 3 sessions a day, you're done.
I just looked at the syllabus and it only says it's 50, like.
Midterm is 50% and the other
So
final is
there's
50%.
no homework, no
No,
nothing?
nothing.
So basically the exam will consist of whatever we do in class?
That's it.
Really?
Yeah. We got a lot of stuff to go through in class, though.
Yeah, but it's, yeah.
forgot you guys used to live in a double together.
Yeah. And 3 of us. All 3 years.
What do you want, eh? What do you want? Eh?
He's just a tinker.
Attaboy, Gabe.
Do you ever actually do anything with that?
I have it.
Sometimes.
I have it, but I never do anything. I just like make fun, like just like play along.
Yeah, like if I know someone on speech, and like right now, literally 5 minutes ago, I found Audie and I sent her a picture.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about that. Maybe soon set up either a phone call or maybe in the next couple of days and we'll talk about it.
You know, that is like right for those fake accounts, man. For the most part.
Maybe 1 or 2 issues.
I'd be surprised.
So when an investor's like looking at a property like beforehand, are they like figuring out like mortgage and interest rates, or are they figuring out what their income could be beforehand, like what their monthly
All of that.
like this like but I'm saying like as far as it's like let's say I knew I was gonna like the total profit would be like $1,400 a month. Like am I gonna go beforehand to the mortgage and see like if my payment's gonna be $1,400 a month to them, or is it do you see what I'm saying? Or?
I know exactly what you're saying, and we are most certainly covering that.
Okay.
But not tonight.
All right.
Okay.
You're going so far ahead of the curve, man.
But basically, what you're asking is called the debt service coverage ratio, and it's basically looking at what your mortgage payment is going to be relative to what the income the property is producing.
Yeah.
So, but as you're saying, $1,400 a month is maybe your net operating income. Well, out of that, the lender would potentially allow you to make payments to them of like 80% of that. So then you would kind of back into what the mortgage would be based upon that sort of ratio.
Yeah.
So, but like, what if they, so I know this is from a little while back, but like, say with that whole like pool example you were talking about, and
Yep.
it was like that 30,000?
Yep.
And while like, you couldn't increase the price necessarily to get out of the gate to 30,000 more, do they do it in a way, in a fashion where it'd be paid back over time, where once that 30,000 is paid off, and say they locked them in with like a 30-year mortgage, it would pay back past that 30,000?
It's possible that you could refinance the property and you might be able to roll that, because what would happen is an appraiser would come out and would say, well, this really is only contributing $10,000 worth of value, so they might allow you to increase the overall value of the loan by an extra $10,000, but probably not by the full 30. Okay, most everybody is missing a couple of people. I don't want to get started on this until. What we're going to be looking at is the first spreadsheet, so you can go ahead and get that out and take a look at this. This is basically kind of a home ownership analysis and kind of really looking at the idea of what sort of rate of return that you would generate potentially owning a home, okay? And a couple of the variables there, and we'll kind of work through this example, and hopefully I didn't screw up something there. Hopefully it's pretty straightforward. Okay. Still missing 1 or 2 folks, but I think I'm going to go ahead and start. All right. So, let's look at this example in terms of what we have. Now, what I want to go ahead and do, just so that it's clear as to kind of what is an input and what is kind of an output. So everything on the right-hand side, just go ahead and kind of, everything over here on the right-hand side, all of that is output. So all of that is determined by some sort of formula, okay? So everything on the right-hand side is definitely all, on the right-hand side of the sheet, is all determined by formula. The other items that are determined by a formula, the sale price at the end of the holding period, where it has 208,669.33, that is an output. Okay, the reason I'm telling you this is you're going to need to know that when we go through and we do these calculations, okay? So the 208,669.33, the sale price at the end of the holding period, that is an output. Sales commission of the $12,520.16. That is an output. The $36,000 down payment amount, $36,000 down payment amount is an output. The mortgage amount of $144,000 is an output. And then finally, the mortgage payment of $1,006.87, that is also an output. Okay? So everything else, if you actually put the spreadsheet on Excel, you will see everything else that's in yellow, those are your inputs. Okay? Those are the things that you're going to be given, if you will, in a problem statement that you're going to have to then solve for the others. Does that make sense? Yes?
What do you mean by output? That's just the end result from the formula?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All the others are inputs in the sense those are the people, the given information.
Right. Okay.
The output is what you're solving for.
Right.
Okay? All right, so let's just start with the first little piece. And well, first of all, let me just sort of talk about what this is. The end result of what we're really trying to get to is this number over here at the far right, the return on investment of the $39,800 being 8.52% annually. So what that represents is it's kind of like the cap rate that we were talking about before. In other words, it's a rate of return that we would get if we bought this property for the dollar amount we said we're going to buy it for, with the down payment that we said we're going to have, and what we're going to end up with as an annualized rate of return. Does that make sense? Yes or no? But this is basically complicating things up a little bit because we're adding in a few extra variables. Okay? That's what it's in essence doing. Okay. So let's just kind of start with the bits and pieces that we're given. And this, once again, came directly out of the book, so you can kind of refer back to it, get additional information if you need to from the book on the example. So you get the initial cost of the house of $180,000. All right, and we said the annual appreciation is 3%, and the holding period is 5 years. And we want to know what is the sale price at end of year 5. Okay, so that's the first thing we're solving for. Does everybody follow what we're asking? Okay, so what we're saying is we bought this house for $180,000. Every year we expect it to go up in value by 3% a year for 5 years. And what we're asking is what do we anticipate, if that happens, that the value will be at the end of that 5-year period. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes or no? Okay, now, how do we do that with a calculator? In this case, they're giving this to us on an annual basis. So that means we're going to put it into the calculator as one payment per year, or one period per year. And we're going to put in $180,000 is what we are, in essence, paying for the property. And so now we're looking at it a bit of more of a macro view, and we're saying we're going to pay $180,000. Well, if we're paying $180,000, that implies what? That that's going to be a negative outflow to us. Yes? Okay? So we're going to put that $180,000 as our present value, but we're going to make it a negative because we're viewing it as being an outflow to us. Okay? Everybody comfortable with that? Yes or no? All right. Then we're going to put in 3% as the interest rate. Okay? And then we're going to say 5 years is our term. Now, if we were to type in, under this circumstance, 5 shift in, what would happen is it would just simply show up 5. Because it's basically saying, if we were to sort of
We're saying, is that what it is? Okay.
If we were to put in 5 shift in, instead of just 5 in, what it would do would be 5 times 1, so it would still show up as 5, is my point. Okay, because it's annual compounding.
It's already put in.
Right. Okay, so now what we're solving for is future value. How much would it be worth 5 years from now? Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no, conceptually?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, here's the first thing. My calculator up there, as you can see, is still set for 12 payments per year. So in order to change it, I've got to do 1 shift, then payments per year. Now it's set for 1 payment per year. Okay? All right, now 180,000 plus or minus present value, 3% as our interest rate, 5 as our term, solve for future value. And what we end up with is 208,669.33. Okay? It looks like we match up with what we have there on the spreadsheet. Yes? Okay, everybody cool with that? Yes or no? Okay, so I'm just going to write that in. 208,669.33. Okay, working our way down the page. Okay, any questions up to this point? I mean, does that make sense to you guys in the sense that, okay, we bought the house for $180,000, we've held on to it for 5 years, the market has increased at roughly 3% a year, and so we're saying after 5 years, that house that we paid $180,000 for is now worth $208,000, with doing nothing else to the house other than owning it for that 5-year period. Everybody cool with that? Okay, making sure. Okay. Now, at the end of that 5 years, we're going to potentially sell it, and whenever we sell it, we're going to incur a sales commission. All right? In this case, they've given you that your sales commission is going to be 6%. So we simply take and multiply the 208,669.33 times 6%, and that gives us 12,520 and 16 cents. Okay, which is the next line item there, the actual sales commission line item. Okay. Everybody good? Okay. Then they say, all right, the down payment percent is going to be 20%. All right. Now, the down payment is 20% of the initial cost of the house. So that is, the 20% is going to be based on the $180,000. Everybody with me on that? Okay. So the original loan we're getting on the house is based off the initial cost. This is, even though we're trying to kind of work down the page, I mean, the way that it's sort of set up, it kind of looks like it's out of order, and it sort of kind of is in that respect, but that's just the way we're sort of working through it. Okay, so 180,000 times 20% is 36,000. So down payment amount, okay? Yes, sir.
So that's the amount we put down?
Yes.
Okay.
That is, in other words, when we buy the house today, and we're buying it for $180,000,
Okay, yeah.
we are effectively writing a check to the lender for $36,000 for the down payment. Okay? Or actually not to the lender, really it's to the seller of the house. Okay? Okay. Moving forward. Okay. The next items that we are told the mortgage term 30 years. We're told the mortgage interest rate is 7.5%. And we want to solve for the mortgage amount based on all of that. Okay, well actually, we don't need all of that to solve for the mortgage amount, but we'll get there. Okay, so to get the mortgage amount, all we're going to be doing is as follows. We're going to take the original price of the home, $180,000, and we're going to subtract out the $36,000 down payment. Okay. $180,000 initial purchase price, and we're going to subtract out the down payment of the $36,000, and that is going to give us $144,000 as the loan amount. Okay? We good? Okay? All right. So that would be the loan amount. Then they throw us for a little bit of a loop, not a big one, but they're going to throw in some financing cost. Okay? I'll explain those here real quickly. Let's go ahead and throw them in here just for a second. $3,800. Okay, let's explain these real quickly. So whenever you get a mortgage loan from a traditional lender, they make money in a couple of different ways, okay? The first and foremost, they make money off of the interest they charge you, yes? That was obvious. But they also, in many instances, will charge you upfront fees, okay? Those upfront fees, sometimes they will call them discount points, sometimes they'll call them points, sometimes they'll call them loan origination fees, sometimes they'll call them financing fees, but basically, it is a dollar amount that you are paying to the lender for them to go through the internal processing necessary to actually make you that loan. Does that make sense?
Is that another reason why people tend to stick to the same company?
Is the case that in some instances, if you stick with the same lender, they may say, we won't charge you any loan origination fees, okay? Or they'll make it less cumbersome in some way, okay? But they may make up for it with a higher interest rate, okay? It's a trade-off, all right? Now, just to throw this out there, I'm not trying to complicate this problem up, because I'm not going to, but lenders also can make money off of prepayment penalties.